All right. Good morning, everyone. Good lunchtime, I guess. Welcome, everyone. My name is Erin Seegmiller. I'm the Senior Manager of Early Stage Programs here at Invest Ottawa. And I also have the pleasure to get to really lean in on some sector work with our clean tech and health tech. So really, this is all coming together for me today. Really excited to welcome you to Leaders Creating a Sustainable World, streaming live online and also here at Bayview Yards, our innovation hub. Ottawa's innovation hub, located on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. We are grateful to have the opportunity to present in this territory and come together as a national community. Further, I want to respect and affirm the inherent and treaty rights of all Indigenous peoples across the land. We recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and all Indigenous peoples have and continue to make in both shaping and strengthening this community. So for today's event, we have a jam-packed agenda. We have business leaders and entrepreneurs, investors, thought leaders, activists here in Ottawa, Canada, and globally here streaming live and also joining here in person. But if I look back at the beginning of the month at the F Factor event that really kicked everything off, my colleague, the MC at that event, kind of my rival in competition, obviously, they mentioned that we were in all those years that we were talking about being in unprecedented times. That was just a warm-up. Here we are. It's unprecedented times. It's here. And I don't know about you, but this year feels like the longest year ever. And it's only March. We're not even out of the quarter. And I've been known to have a few kind of internet death spirals over the past few months. It's not pretty out there, but that is why I'm so grateful to work at an organization like Invest Ottawa that's truly committed in driving a positive change and bringing people together to remind us that we're not alone. It is no question that sustainability and women should always be supported. And it's not only just important, but it's essential. So you'll see today that sustainability can come in many different forms, including AI, health tech, clean tech, smart ag, and all of these are interconnected, as true sustainability requires balancing economic, social, and environmental well-being. As I mentioned, I work on our programs here at Invest Ottawa, and part of our programming, all of our programming talks a lot about founders helping founders. But when it comes to International Women's Month, it's about everyone helping everyone. So as you network today and meet new people, really think about that one thing you can do to help the other person, whether it's sharing a resource, meeting for coffee, or just making that connection for someone else in the room. You can make a difference. It feels a bit overwhelming when we look at everything on the grand scale, but just focus on what you can do today. Speaking of help, we are really grateful to have a lot of regional, global, and Canadian partners who are making this happen. So thank you to everyone for joining us along the journey. This event is possible thanks to our title event sponsor, SAS, and our supporting sponsors, Calian and Rogers. Now, my job is to keep everything rolling today and keep everything on time. And unlike some other MCs from earlier this month, I take my job really seriously. So we're going to have some housekeeping stuff and then we'll get right into it. First, we are taking questions for the last 10 minutes of every session. And in order to make sure that we fit in all the questions, my colleague, MC, rival, competition, Lindsay, feel free to give them a wave. They'll be taking the questions and then making sure that we have enough time to go through all of them. If you have any questions online, feel free to type them in the chat. We're also taking snapshots and video footage, so now's your time to tell them if you have a good side that you want to be captured. And if you are an entrepreneur or an aspiring entrepreneur, please visit our booth out in the lobby. We can chat with you about how we're here to help at every stage of your entrepreneurial journey. Be sure to share your experience on social media using the hashtags IWM2025 as well as Accelerate Action. And as always, we want to find out how we can do better. So we'll be sharing a survey. Please fill it out. It really helps us to ensure that every session gets better and better from here. And with that, we'll kick things off. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Christine Jackson, Executive Director, Canadian Public Sector at SAS. Let's welcome Christine to the stage.
Thank you so much, Erin, and good morning, everyone. I want to start things off on a bit of an exciting note with some audience engagement, so work with me here. By show of hands, who has experienced bias as part of their personal life? Think friends, family, day-to-day encounters. Several there. Next question, who has experienced bias in your professional life? Co-workers, leaders, managers, organizations you worked for or maybe wanted to work for? Third question here, who has experienced bias as a result of AI? Okay, that's the answer I expected, and we want to keep the number of hands low on that. So that's the impetus of today's conversation around trustworthy AI. In order to keep that number of hands down, we need to be careful with what we're doing and doing it in responsible ways. But first, let's take a step back. What is AI? AI can mean a number of different things to many people, and many of those definitions are not wrong. But at a foundational level, AI is the use of systems to emulate human tasks and activities, usually through some sort of training. That might mean the social media filters that you use to make yourself look different. That could be product advertisements that you see when you're online shopping. It could be ChatGPT, or for some of you, that might be something very futuristic and forward-looking that is just a big blur. Where we're starting to see society go, however, and the context is changing, and certainly from the perspective of SAS, where I work, we've injected two very important words into our definition of artificial intelligence. Those two words being ethical and transparent. And the reason we've done that is because of the importance of those in the outcomes when we use AI. It's no secret that humans trust humans, much more so than a machine. Think back to the last time you went to the bank. Are you more likely to count the cash that's been dispensed to you out of an ATM, or more likely to recount the cash that's been counted in front of you by a teller? Chances are you're double checking the ATM, not the human in front of you. But the whole purpose of the trustworthy AI equation is to make sure that we're injecting that level of comfortability when humans are interacting with machines. That poses a challenge. It's no secret that AI has injected some phenomenal features into today's society. We're able to do things more effectively and efficiently than ever before. But with that comes some scary uncharted territory and some uncertainty. That's the risk part of this. But it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure we're balancing that equation, risk versus reward. AI impacts everyone. I'm sure that many of you encountered or interacted with AI in some capacity when you got ready for work this morning, maybe on your commute, maybe in the time that you've spent socializing and networking today. It's everywhere. From a business perspective, we have to look at our ability to analyze data. How is that data impacting our consumers, customers, and stakeholders? Of course, in between the business and the consumer layer are policymakers and regulators, the people who are ensuring AI, among other things, are safe and fair. And then from the consumer perspective, from the perspective of all of us in this room and online, am I being treated fairly? And is my privacy being protected? We, of course, inhabit the business and the consumer lens, making it that much more important. Let's talk about the goodness of AI first. Let's start on a positive note here. AI has afforded us the opportunity to automate repetitive tasks more so than we probably could have fathomed years ago. In automating decisions, we are able to repurpose, and notice I'm using the word repurpose, not replace. We are able to repurpose human capital to be a lot more strategic versus tactical in what we do on a day-to-day basis. In addition to that, we're able to dive into greater detail and look at things that previously we could only take a look at a cursory level. We inject more intelligence into our products through new features and functions, and all of that yields a lot more consistent accuracy. Think of it this way. A machine doing something repetitiously decreases the element of human error, for example. This has allowed us to accelerate at paces that are unbelievable. And this is why the world of AI, there continues to be investment and development on an ongoing basis. It's happening out there right now as we're sitting here speaking. We are able to make real-time automated decisions. How phenomenal is that? Especially in a day and age where on-demand and instant gratification have become a need, not just a want. We've been able to accelerate and keep up with that need. And as a result, we've been able to amplify that. As decisions are made at a machine and a repetitious level, the volume and our ability to work faster, smarter, stronger, better, you name it, that has all been amplified. That's the positive side of it. But just as quickly as we're able to make positive decisions, the likelihood and propensity of those potentially poor decisions to infiltrate what we're doing, that's there too. The amplify piece is where it starts to get murky, the positive versus the negative. And then ultimately comes the accountability question. If and when that happens, who's to blame? Unintended harm continues to, and probably will continue to occur with AI. That's why it's upon all of us to make sure we're doing what we can to mitigate. AI has been around since the 1950s, since neural networks were started to use in certain contexts. And as you can see on the visual here from the 1980s into the early 2000s, there is unintended harm that occurs. This doesn't look so bad. But let's fast forward to the last decade. This explodes at a massive scale, especially in the last 2 to 3 years. Now, some of these instances of unintended harm are not that harmful and can be a bit funny. Think back to the viral image of the Pope in the puffer jacket, or accidentally AI detecting a coach's bald head as a football. We can move on from those relatively easily without too much harm to anyone involved. The more staggering part of this, though, is the negative impacts of some of these harms. An Afghan refugee denied asylum because of faulty translation. A Black man arrested because of poor facial recognition. A hospital algorithm that prioritized kidney patient treatment based on gender. A deep fake of a military base explosion that caused a downturn in the stock market. These all have impact. Impact to people's livelihood, their financial prosperity, their health and well-being. There are impacts to people's ability to live. That's where trustworthy AI comes into the equation, and that's why it becomes so important. Now, what is trustworthy AI? I could spend an awful lot of time talking about the importance of and what trustworthy AI certainly means, but boiled down to a very simple level, trustworthy AI is our ability to act ethically when we use AI tools and technologies. It's our ability to make sure that we are not harming people, and as well as ensuring that our values, either as an organization or society more broadly, are being taken into consideration, and what we're doing is in fact reflective of that. Perhaps the most important piece of this, however, is the question and the contrast between the could we versus the should we. Make no mistake, the answer to the could we question will almost always be yes now. Technology and innovation has come so far that we can answer yes to this question in almost any use case. The more important question, however, is the should we. That's the question that needs to be debated and negotiated among all of us. That's where a principle-driven approach comes into the equation. And again, I could spend a lot of time, and we do as an organization, talking about this. But as I talked about, human centricity, the fact that humans ultimately trust humans, that's where we need to make sure that we are putting humans at the center of our considerations from an AI perspective. From that comes inclusivity and accessibility, as well as our ability to incorporate diverse perspectives and also yielding transparency as a result of that. We need to be able to explain why and what we're doing. From that comes an accountability piece, our ability to proactively mitigate risks, and then of course at a standard technological level, making sure it's robust, reliable, and safe, and of course safeguarding privacy and security. But why should we care? As individuals, we can think of qualitative examples as to why this is important and why it matters to us and our families and our friends. But let's take a level up and look at from an enterprise and a corporate level. This can be staggering. Gartner has predicted that by 2028, enterprises that use AI governance, or in other words, trustworthy AI, ethical AI, they will achieve higher customer trust ratings and better regulatory compliance scores. Think of the economic impact that that has. The true quantitative impact. Better profit margins, better revenues, increased workforce optimization, you name it. There's a ton of benefit here. Interestingly enough, A lot of the key factors as to why AI governance is critical to success are also the rewards. When you think of unlocking productivity, competitive advantage, all the aspects listed on the screen here, these are some of the rewards and benefits that I referred to earlier, and also why it's critical to success. In other words, trustworthy AI, when it's at the center of the circle in what we're considering, that's where we yield the best result. So before we get into the panel discussion, I want to leave you with these 3 questions, what we refer to at SAS as the ethical inquiry. By looking at these 3 questions, we are able to better balance what we're doing from the use of AI perspective. For what purpose, to what end, and for whom might this fail? In answering those 3 questions, we're able to balance the reward and benefit that I spoke about, while also mitigating the unintended harm. So with that all being said, let's dive into some more detail with our panel. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's great. I love the repurpose, not replace. And I know we'll be diving into more of those questions. So without further ado, I will welcome the panelists to the stage, Shorey, Vidya, and Francis. Please join me in welcoming them. Yeah.
I don't think it matters. Excellent. Thanks very much for joining. I think this is an incredibly important conversation, both in the context of International Women's Month, as well as what we're doing from a public sector perspective, generally speaking. So maybe to kick off, since introductions were a bit light, we'll go through the panel here to do a quick introduction. And if you could share a little bit about how your organization and departments are using AI. Vidya, if you wanted to kick us off.
Sure. Thank you so much, Christine. And absolutely awesome to be here with my co-panelists. So happy International Women's Day /month. I'm Vidya Shankanarayan, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister of People and Culture at the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. And although right now my day job is not 100% in the digital and data field, the bulk of my career has actually been in digital data and IT. And I'm excited for the panel to unfold because my team, in about a year ago, in a previous department, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, we launched the Government of Canada's first generative AI solution to the public, which actually made it into the clerk's annual report and has won, of course, a few awards. No self-praise here, it is all the team. But the reason I'm highlighting this is because having diversity and inclusion within the team that actually developed the solution and how we approached the Canadian agriculture landscape just about a year ago was very key, because agriculture typically is a field where it's mostly male dominated. There were barely any women in the field. And as women were coming on board, they were struggling to actually get up and running. So I can't wait to delve deeper, but I will pause for now.
Shorey?
Great. Microphone live? Yeah, excellent. Hi, I'm Shorey Seegmiller, and I'm the Commissioner of the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. As one of my table mates said to me today, I'd never even heard of that agency. So we are the regulator that actually holds the banks to account to make sure that their market conduct respects customers and consumers. So it's a consumer protection agency. And the other role of the agency is to help Canadians maintain financial well-being and resilience through financial literacy. It is really interesting to think about financial literacy. I think it's something that each of you can think about in your own life, in your own family. I think if you ask yourself the question, what do I wish I knew at 15 that I now know in terms of financial wellness and well-being? I think everybody in the room would have probably a list of at least 3 things they wish they had known. So when you think about the role of government, and this is a panel of people who have dedicated our careers to the public service, our role in government, aside from government takes money, government gives money, otherwise government provides services and a regulatory framework in which those services can be led. So as a regulator, the question of how do we use AI in the future, or how are we using it presently, is very intertwined with the ethical issues that surround regulatory frameworks and what we're trying to do. Interestingly, another one of my table mates said to me today that maybe we should just deregulate everything. We can watch that experiment south of the border and see how it goes for them. But it's not happening anytime soon in Canada. So the role of not just generative AI, but pretty much all technology innovation is very important in the conversation of how we regulate in the future. So I'll just leave it at that, because then we'll have specific questions. Frances, over to you.
Great, thank you. So it's a real pleasure to be here. I want to congratulate Invest Ottawa, because I don't know of very many other organizations that have a whole International Women's Month. So congratulations on that. So my name is Frances McCrae. I'm the Deputy Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth in the Government of Canada, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I worked with Shorey before. I've worked with Vidya before, and so really happy to be here. I do want to just recognize, I do this a lot, but it's because our headquarters over in Gatineau is kind of really located right at the mouth of the Shorey River, and we think about it all the time because of the space that we're on and the duty of care we owe to the lands that have been preserved for us by Indigenous peoples for so long. And so I do want to recognize the territory that we're on today, which is the land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. So I do want to also say, just to talk what, Christine's earlier comments about, humans in this process. And I think this is something we are going to have to talk about. As the public sector, you may not know this, but there was just a strategy released about a week ago, which is an AI strategy for the Public Service of Canada. Very first one. It's going to be a 2-year strategy, and then they're going to revisit it in 2 years. But there are some really important components of that, and I will just pick one of them, and one is public trust. We need, above all, as a government of Canada, any government needs to retain the trust of the public that it serves, and that needs to feel confidence in the way that government is delivering services, developing policy, developing regulation. And so we're really lucky to have that piece that is going to guide us. We have had a guide on generative AI for quite some time, which has been getting people to use this. And I will just maybe stop and say, in my own organization, it's a small organization, but I have everyone from administrative assistants giving each other courses on how to use it. I've got people in IT who use voice software, AI tools to be able to develop training material. They've been doing this for 3 years. So there are things that can be done quite easily to improve productivity and to improve innovation. And so, we've got a lot of other examples. We can go into those, but I will say it's in very active use, but there are guidelines and guardrails on that. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. I think it's interesting to hear the use cases of some of what's coming up from a public sector perspective and how that interacts with some of the private sector and other industries as well. But for the purpose of this panel, we'll stick more with the public sector. So Vidya, I'll ask you the question. Could you comment a little bit about the intersectionality between AI and the government world?
Absolutely. And actually, I'm going to pick up from where Frances left off with regards to public trust and guardrails. So AI revolution is already here. And I would say the last time perhaps we had such a significant shift in the world was when we moved from horse-drawn carriages to automobiles. Fundamental shift. Across the board, doesn't matter which area we're talking about. As we spoke about, there's policy, there's regulations, there's technology, and there's data. So when AI meets the government, all of these policy, regulations, trust, diverse thinking, inclusion, all come into the picture. But then we also do know that from a public trust perspective, our citizens, they trust the government for the data we actually collect about them and how we analyze the data and how do we actually leverage that data in providing them services, in taxing them, in regulating the number of regulations that we actually have in place. So I'm going to mention, I would say, maybe the top 3 items when it comes to where AI and the government intersect. First and foremost is how the government does its business. All of the business processes that we have within the government that were built most of the time in a pre-electronic age. Here in the audience, I think we have a combination of public servants and private sector. However, it is Ottawa, so everyone in Ottawa does know the government quite well. So first and foremost is the government's business processes, which also goes into other industries. You go to the banks and you look at the screens behind, they actually have screens that look like the DOS age. They just have very nice interfaces on top of it that the customers see. Taking non-electronic or pre-electronic age business processes and slapping on AI rules is not going to work most of the time. So this is the first item that, whether it's government or private sector, you need to be looking at. Second is data. Data privacy, data stewardship, because data and trust are, I was going to say, they're 2 sides of the same coin. Last and really very important is diversity and inclusion of who is actually working on your AI solutions. I briefly mentioned a use case about a year ago. I hired an AI team, all from universities. I could not hire one single woman to the team. I contacted 12 Canadian universities. I did not have a single woman. I had a diversity across with regards to different ethnicities, but there was not a single woman. And that is extremely concerning. We still launched, as I said, it was for agriculture. Again, 100% male-dominated field. So inclusion and gender inclusion, if we do not start building in gender inclusion right coming in from high schools to universities to the job market, we are going to fail the AI game.
Vidya, I like the analogy of going from horse-drawn carriage to automobiles, because I would agree that's the landscape we're in now. And on one hand, it seems to have happened very quickly, but it's actually been a lengthy journey to get to this point in some regards. So with that being said, Shorey, could you comment a little bit about, in your time in government, how have you seen AI and technology change?
Well, when I started, there were horse-drawn buggies. Sorry. No, just kidding. That's right. I was only 3. Yeah, no. You know what? I think it's a great analogy, because if you think about, and Henry Ford said this, if you had asked people what they wanted, they would have said, I'd like faster horses. Okay. Because they couldn't imagine a world. I mean, they already had roads. So, like, what was the big deal about these automobiles? Really, we already have roads. We can already use those roads to get places. And I have 6 horses. So one of the things that I've noticed in government is how technology liberates the imagination. So if your service to, for instance, in my organization, if our service is to regulate banks for consumer protection, it's true, we could use an abacus to calculate the number of complaints banks are getting, or we could, by hand count the number of transactions that have failed in our supervisory responsibilities. But the point is, if you can feed enormous amounts of data and that the human mind can't even really conceive of, I mean, it's funny, Francis said to me earlier, it used to be that $1 billion was a lot of money, and it may not be in the future. It's the same thing, right? So we thought we were doing enormous amounts of data analysis, right? But we had no idea what could be done. Now with AI, when you can feed in just enormous amounts of data and get the patterns and recognize the actual problem spaces for supervision and compliance, it enables the work you were already doing to scale and to speed up at a rate that was unimaginable before with your 6 horses. So I think over time, what I've seen is there's no lack of imagination for how we can improve things, to be more efficient, to scale, to be more creative. The part that's difficult, I think, is cultural. So one of the problems for people, and I've seen it in my career, I've spent a lot of time working in the innovation space. And I think people often think that government and innovation are two diametrically opposed concepts. They think that regulation is an innovation stifler, for example, as opposed to an innovation enabler. So I think one of the things that I have not seen change quite as quickly as the arrival of the technology is a full understanding of how what we do, the guardrails that we set up, how those can actually protect individuals, whether it's privacy, security of information, even personal safety, financial data information, how we can protect it. Can I just see a show of hands? How many people in this room know what open banking is? Okay, that's about 10 times more than most of the rooms I go into, so good on all of you. So open banking is coming. For those who didn't put up their hand, open banking is coming. How many people in the room use fintechs, use Wealthsimple or PayPal or financial apps of any kind to do budgeting, so quite a few. Did you know Canada doesn't have open banking yet, which means that you're using something called screen scraping for that information to be shared, for your financial data to be transferred to these apps. Now, for the most part, it's a pretty safe thing to do, particularly if you know the apps. I mean, PayPal is a well-established, well-reviewed, well-understood app, but you don't really control your data yet. And that skip to the place where we will have control over our data is a very important step for the country from a regulatory perspective, from secure data perspective, and it will allow for a lot more fintechs to come and support you to provide services. It will allow you to do it in a way that's safe and secure. I think we are still culturally in the technology innovation space. We're very trusting. We're very Canadian about the way we go about our lives. We just think if this exists, it must be safe. Other people are using it. It must be good. It must be safe. Our job as government is actually to dig a little deeper than that and ask the questions of, is it actually safe? Are there guardrails? Are there ways to prevent fraud? Is there a way to understand what kind of scams are coming so that you don't get scammed? And then to also figure out, so whose responsibility is it if there is fraud? Having the technology support for fraud detection, for example. How many people in this room have had a call from their bank in the last year saying, we've noticed some strange activity on fill in the blank, your credit card, your account, whatever? How many people in this room have had that call? Yeah. That's because there are machines that can do pattern recognition that will alert your bank to call you to say, how many people in the room have had an e-alert saying your account has fallen below $100? Right. So those are systems, digital systems, that enable the protection of consumers through AI, essentially support, to allow services to be enhanced that existed before. Before that, banks have always been concerned about fraud. They've always been worried about the security and safety of your money. The government of Canada insures your accounts through CDIC. We have mechanisms. What the technology allows us to do is just amplify what we're already hoping to accomplish in ways that we couldn't do before. So I'm hoping that culturally people will start to understand that you can have the same goals for safety, security, financial resilience, financial well-being, for example, because that just happens to be an area I'm super preoccupied with. You can still have the same goals, and then you can use technology in ways to support those goals that you never could before, and to use the innovation and the imagination that it takes to start applying to figuring out, how can this help us? When you see a technology, to start asking those questions. It's a cool technology. How can it help me meet the aims that I am trying to reach?
Shorey makes a really good point about the need to dive deeper. So with that in mind, let's pivot a little bit to the responsible and ethical use of AI. So Frances, I'll turn things to you. How is AI forming the sort of the gender landscape and world?
Yeah, I think this is a really important point, Christine, and just to pick up on the point that Vidya made was just around the diversity of teams. So how many people here use personal assistants on your phone? Amazon, Siri, Alexa. Okay, what's your impression? If they had a personality, what would that be? Do you think? Like, think about what's a word that would describe that personality? Subservient, solicitous, giving. What do you think is designed into that? Who do you think designed it? Right? So I will point you to a report that was done in 2019 by UNESCO. You might know UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It's called I'd Blush If I Could. It was a really groundbreaking report because what they tested was the ability of personal assistants to answer questions that were abusive and full of bias and violence towards women. And what came back? I'd blush if I could. I am not kidding you. So the platforms didn't know, and I happen to know the researcher who did this work, actually. She's a Canadian, it turns out. She lives in Ottawa. I'll tell you all about her. But what happened was the platforms did not realize it. They didn't even know that was designed in because they hadn't tested it for that, right? When they were told about it, 3 of the 4 key platforms fixed their personal assistant to not have those kinds of responses. But this is the whole point that Vidya is making. This is why, Shireen's talking about the banking system. Anybody here think the banking system is designed for women? Is it designed for racialized people? Is it designed for Indigenous people? Anybody think that? No. So we got to get in at the front end of AI, make sure it's designed right so that that system does not put us backwards and having to do catch up on things like making banking work for women, making banking work for racialized people, making banking work for people with disabilities. So this is really key, not just women. It's about every different type of diversity you need to be thinking about. So us, we absolutely see it. And the AI strategy that we have for the government of Canada, it is, we want to be careful to make sure we've got the right people, but the skills are important, right? We need the right skills. We need more women going into these areas. We need more people with disabilities going into these areas. We need more racialized people going into these areas because that's how we'll get the design right at the front end.
Absolutely, Frances. Yes, round of applause for sure. Frances is absolutely right. If not designed appropriately and responsibly, the biases that we all have, whether it's gender or otherwise, are going to be perpetuated into the models and the outcomes that we see. So Vidya, I'll come to you next. As a leader in the public sector, what should we be doing to mitigate some of those biases?
Okay, I'm just loving that. I'm going to pick up from where Shireen and Frances left off. So first and foremost is the skills gap, and deliberately and consciously. This is not just, by design, deliberately, consciously ensuring that the skills gap is actually being mitigated, because we can't just say, okay, we'll just depend on the universities, and the universities are depending on the schools. Women are actually not entering into master's programs for AI. I know that because I contacted a dozen Canadian universities, including I would say the big ones. They had zero women doing masters specialized in AI or data management. And they're like, nobody is actually applying to them. So the skills gap is real, and it is something that we have to now be deliberate, conscious, and design it in, because whether it is the public service or the private sector, if we don't have the skills coming in from the universities, how are they actually going to be joining us to design the future systems? Second, from a government perspective, I'm looking at my co-panelists here, is that how can we actually be part of the design in ensuring that universities, and of course starting from the schooling system, that this becomes part of the work that we are actually supporting Canadians and this is where Invest Ottawa, I know in the past I've worked with them, where they bring in high school students to actually say, okay, and I'm talking about female students, diverse students, to say these are areas that you can grow into. But what happens is many of them, because I've discussed this with women students, especially in the technology area, that is my background, they don't get the support. Even if they sign up, even if they have the grades, they don't get the support. My own story, I was born and raised in India. My dad's an engineer, and he said, you can do anything you want. I have goosebumps saying this because math was not my area of strength. But it became my area of strength because I had my dad helping me at home. Not all women have that. You just don't have it. In fact, you have nobody helping you at home. And even if you had parents who were supportive, they may not be the experts in math. Just one of the areas very essential for AI. That's the reason I said math. So that support system, most women don't have it. I have personally spoken to students in different jobs that I've been in, and they have left computer engineering programs because of the lack of support that they have. So again, how could we, thinking out loud here, even if each one of us choose to hold hands and support one other woman who is going through the educational system to become the future skill. So that is, support system is the second one. And third, I would say, is it's massive change happening. Keeping the horse and buggy example that we picked up on, while this change was happening over 100 years ago, or approximately, I'd say 100 years ago, people knew that their jobs are going to change. At that time, people were concerned. You may smile at what I'm going to say. People had jobs that was about picking up horse dung from the roads. They were like, oh my God, I'm no longer going to have my job. I'm no longer going to actually be able to pick up horse dung because you're actually replacing horse-drawn carriages with automobiles. Jobs changed. It's now you fast forward to today, just imagine the significant change that is going to be unfolding over the next 5 years. You showed us the numbers from Gartner for 2028. How can we support our current employees with the significant change that is coming up? Francis mentioned about everybody getting trained. We can't leave people behind, and especially leave women behind. Women are away sometimes for 12 to 18 months on parental leave. They come back and the workplace is completely different. And many of them would actually leave because they can't keep up. So please, how can we support our existing skills who are in the government, in the private sector, through this change that is happening real time around us?
Can I just add something to that? I don't know if my mic's working. Yeah. So some of the research that we've done at FCAC on girls and boys and the difference in their financial literacy and financial understanding is that girls are way behind boys on financial literacy. Why is that? First of all, we learned girls get much smaller allowances. Literally, they are financed less than their brothers. And when they do get an allowance, their parents will often manage the allowance, as opposed to boys who are just given the cash and told, go buy your video games, boys, you go. So just the in-home treatment and gender bias that is visible right from a young age is quite spectacular, quite stunning. We have had some success doing financial literacy training for girls on apps like Chatter High, where it starts to get them to catch up. So some of our research, and we've either just published it or are publishing it right now, before it drops. TikTok. So there's very interesting research about that, because the problem with math, the problem with really the confidence that young women and girls have in their ability to deal with numbers, whether that's dollars and cents or whether it's numbers in a classroom, that I'd say disabling behavior starts very young. So it's kind of too late if you're looking at it by the time they're registering for engineering courses. But just personally, one of the things that I find very heartening about having even a panel like this and a conversation like this to a room full that is not just women, and thank you for male allies for being here. One of the things that I find very heartening is when I took maternity leave 1,000 years ago, I actually ended up staying at home for 7 years full-time with my kids. When I decided to come back into the workforce, I realized, ooh, there's a problem. There's going to be a problem with my CV. There's a 7-year gap. And I could have proudly put at home raising kids, most important job you'll ever do, hardest job you'll ever do, most fun you'll ever have. I could have put that in as the annotation there, but I realized that wasn't actually going to get me paid employment. So instead, I took all the dates off my CV and didn't actually mention that at all, and have since had a CV with absolutely no dates on it. What's interesting about that is that I understood that unspoken bias, that being at home for 7 years raising kids was not going to be seen as an asset in my career evolution. And if I had $1 for everybody who had said to me, "Ooh, you took 7 years off? Wow. Really, you were kind of, going places before that." If I had $1 for every time somebody said that to me, I probably would never have had to go back to work for paid employment again. So I think the problem that you raise, Vidya, is one that is not just about hiring people. It's about societal conversations. So what you're mentioning, Francis, about actually looking at not taking for granted that the service mindset of the digital assistant is static, that it is what it is, but actually digging deeper and using questioning lines of research to actually ask, are these services insidiously undermining diversity, inclusion, really societal characteristics that we value, or are they actually serving us the way they seem to be serving us? So I do think teaching critical thinking, even when you're not just building AI, but when people are using AI tools, this is where humans do come in, is that we can ask those critical thinking questions that are values driven, and then we can use AI to help us do it. Like having the human impetus for that is really essential. So questioning the status quo, for example, as we put in place various safeguards in banking, we do have to look at, how is this impacting newcomers to Canada? For instance, if you look at low cost, no cost accounts, how is it impacting newcomers? How is it impacting our Indigenous communities? Like, for example, if you need a civic address to get a bank account, but you live on reserve, you don't actually have a civic address. So there's systemic bias in there. So you have to ask yourself, is it enough to require a civic address? Or should you have a system where somebody who is already a client of the bank could just vouch for you and say, instead of classic ID, which you may not have because you may not have a car, you may not have a driver's license, you may not have a civic address, how do we get the bias out of the actual foundational building blocks of access? And you need to apply those same questions as you use AI, as you build AI, as you plan for AI as a support to your services. And that is really essential to the ethical aspect of AI. It's actually essential to the ethical aspect of all service delivery. So I would just say AI, while it might be intimidating because it feels like a big brain, is like everything else, whether it's regulation, whether it's marketing, whatever it is, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to test the system to see if it's serving you and other vulnerable members of vulnerable communities. The first question I ask my team on pretty much every subject is, how would this work for federally sentenced offenders who are just released? Like, how would it work for a single mother, who's on social assistance? How does this work for the elderly who actually aren't as digitally savvy as the rest of the community? Like, that's where you test these tools. You have to test them on the periphery, because really in the mainstream, it seems fine. It's really only when you get to the vulnerable that you start to really be able to see the fraying at the edges, where you can challenge the status quo, where you can say, well, that doesn't work for me.
Some excellent points there. I think it's the balance of humans plus technology, not the equation of humans or technology. They have to work hand in hand for sure. Before we go to audience questions, Francis, I want to go to you. What do you see are the biggest opportunities for women in AI in the next few years in the public sector or otherwise?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I do think the skills side is really important, but like, we have to remember AI is trained on large systems, right? It's trained on what it gets in terms of the internet. And I think if we do this right, expose those biases, we may actually expose people to a lot more that they didn't really realize was bias on the internet. You know, I have a colleague when I worked on women's entrepreneurship, and a woman who worked at the Diversity Institute in Toronto, and she said, you know, if you type entrepreneur into, you know, Google and you look for images, pretty much every image that will come up will be a man, usually a white man, right? So it's actually trained on these things that are there. So if we do this right, we actually will expose not just our own public servants, but all our own kids. I do that with my kids all the time. I wouldn't try to manage their allowances. I got to tell you, I'd get like a lot of trouble for that. But you know, if we do this right, we can actually kind of get through to other biases in society that we have kind of accepted, and that kind of exist underground, but people don't really talk about. And I think I really see this as a real opportunity for us to understand where bias exists in our systems, in our institutions, much broader than AI. I would just say the other part of it is, you know, we have to make sure AI is trained on, you know, AI is going to respect things like human rights legislation and obligations. Legislation, right? You can't just kind of throw anything into it. You really have to make sure it's compliant with all these other obligations that we have, particularly in public sector. Our policies, our laws that govern this country, right? We don't want that getting trampled. And maybe the last thing I would say is, you know, when we think about opportunity, I'll tell you, I was to hear Vidya talking about education really made me think about an event that I was at yesterday, and it was we were talking about the situation of women in Afghanistan. The truth is, they can't even get an education, let alone a particular technical education. So this is not just a Canadian problem; it is a global problem. And if we think women in this country don't have access to those kinds of skills and that education, and we are one of the top educators of women in the world, what do we think is happening all around the world? So this is my opportunity for Canadian companies to go in there with the right values, with the right approaches around fairness, around justice, and around non-bias and transparency and safety, and put those products out on the market in the world.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the expressions I like to use is empowered women empower women. And that's what all of us in this room, including our male allies, are here to do and to learn a bit more so that we can take this forward. So with that, thank you very much, panelists. I think we do have some time for audience questions. I'm just looking for, thank you. We'll go to you.
Yes, I've got 3 questions from online, so probably give for time. If anyone has questions, though, that they weren't able to ask, we can do that at the networking break as well. But the first one, in a world where leadership seems to be derived from more opinion and wealth, do you feel that there is a metric whereby AI can be considered more trustworthy than humans?
Shireen, from a finance or wealth perspective, did you want to tackle that one?
I don't think it's from a finance or wealth perspective. I think the question of whether or not digital systems are more trustworthy and whether people rely on it, I think it gets back to my critical thinking point, is that if people start to rely on social media as their news source, if people start to rely on essentially crowdsourced information rather than being able to critically research things themselves, then it's kind of a dumbing down of the community, and we lose our power of critical thinking. And critical thinking is the one thing that will actually allow us to ensure that we have diverse services, that we protect the vulnerable, that we actually stay ahead of the curve in terms of our ability to create and innovate and be resilient. So I can't say it enough. Take nothing at face value. don't believe somebody just because they're richer than you are, or have more education than you do, or different education than you do, or because they sound like they're certain. That's also one of the interesting pieces of research when you look at gender research, and you ask the same questions of men and women. Often women will make the same statements, but with a question mark at the end. Like the intonation will sound like they're less certain, or like they're less sure, or less well-informed, when in fact, after you dig deeper, they may be better informed. They may actually be well educated on a specific subject that they are pronouncing on, as opposed to a male colleague who actually may be less well informed. It's a cultural problem. So my challenge to all of us is to challenge those things in our communities, challenge our things in our workplaces, challenge those things as we are faced with new and evolving opportunities that we don't understand. Don't be afraid to say you don't understand. One of the fun things about starting a new job, and I just started my new job a few months ago, is I said to them, so you'll hear me say over the next few months, I really don't know. The thing you should know about me, though, is that you'll just hear me say that for the rest of my tenure, because there's always stuff I'm not going to know, right? I'm never going to be the best informed person in the room on every subject. And to not be afraid to say, I don't know, I don't understand that. What is that? Rather than just take it as a given because you read it, I don't know, on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it's called now, X. Yeah, not the best way to run a country. So let's actually undertake to think about the biases that are presented to us as fact and challenge them.
We got one in the audience here.
Hello, Kate Whitfield. I sat down with two other professional engineers, all three of us, different sectors, 20 years, so pretty strong related to the earlier stuff. So my question is, I get tons in my Instagram and my LinkedIn about AI, but I need the fastest suggestions towards that understand my business. So municipalities' comforts with AI, or engineering, urban planning comfort with AI. So what's your tip for a service? Because I need it fast. I own my own business. I can't wait that I have time to learn it. So I just don't want to be blanket calling services that support it. Does that make any sense? So how do you find the support to bring AI into your work that works for your type of business?
That's a great question, and certainly something that myself and my team inhabit on a day-to-day basis. I think from your context, one of the natural starting points from a learning perspective would be to challenge your industry on gathering that information and synthesizing it in a meaningful and relevant way to you and your peers that inhabit that same craft. Although AI is widespread and can be quite general, there's also some very industry-specific applications. For example, when I go in and talk to a bank about anti-money laundering, that's not going to resonate with someone who's more in the environmental technology world, or even working in the public sector in some ways. So I would challenge your industry to support that, to make sure that it's relevant. It's no secret that there's a lot of widespread information about that. To some of Shireen's points, I think we need to be careful on the source of that general information, because just as there's a lot of good information, there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. But there are credible sources out there, some AI leadership and thought leadership organizations that will help you, test the waters with your understanding. But I really would challenge your industry and associations on that.
I would add one thing on this. It's moving so fast, right? This is really difficult, I think, for business. So what we tell people, and the same thing in the public sector, it's moving extremely quickly. You have to just start getting your feet wet and just reading and understanding it and being exposed to it. And over time, the use cases for your own organization will emerge. And I think that's got to be one of the hardest things to do as a business, is trying to figure out where to invest, because things are going to move at an incredibly quick pace, way faster than anything we've ever seen. And so I think that's where the hard part is. I would just say, I think that's good advice. Get the industry to start thinking about it, start getting your feet wet and actually getting exposed to it. It's a time investment, there's no question, but I don't think we have any choices.
Quickly going to add is I mentioned in my opening that I worked on the AI, first generative AI solution for the agriculture industry. People might think, hey, why agriculture? It was the right moment at the right time there. But I do want to emphasize, and I fully agree with my co-panelists here, but I want to emphasize as you're designing those services, please ensure that you have a richness of diverse views, gender diversity, and ethno-diversity, because otherwise we would most probably be where we are right now, because the internet, you're just constantly scraping data that was mostly designed for white men. And so for us to be, including the previous question of when can we start trusting, it may take us, if we design it, if we really pay consciously and deliberately design AI services and AI systems with gender and diversity in, I would say, in mind and being deliberate, perhaps in about 10 years, we can actually start trusting more what we get from digital means than from the humans that we speak to. But it's a long journey out there, and we need to make some deliberate actions.
I think we'll wrap it there. We're out of time. Thank you so much for everyone's participation. Happy to chat more at the networking break.
All right. Thank you so much, Christine, for leading that discussion. Really interesting. It also reminded me to contact my brother and ask him what his allowance was. So we're going to have some interesting calls tonight. A really great discussion. Some things that hit with me. Yes, it is the job of the government to dig a little deeper, but it's a good reminder that we should all be digging a little deeper as well. If this interested you, I recommend a book called Invisible Women: Data Bias in a World of Men. It's a bit of a bummer. It's definitely not a beach read, but it's a really important book, and I'm sure so much has changed since it was written in 2019. But carrying on, not a bummer, we're going to invite Sonya Shorey to the stage to moderate the next panel. Sonya is our president and CEO at Invest Ottawa. She has some incredible panelists that are joining her, including Dallas, Deb, Nancy, Leanne, and Danya. So please please join us for a round of applause to welcome everyone onto the stage there.
Thank you. All right. Let's do a little test. Wonderful. While my fellow esteemed panelists join me on the stage, I really was moved by the panel on AI, and I have a few opening thoughts before we jump into the next critical topic that I want to share. So number one of the key takeaways for me, if we don't start educating young women K-12 and the opportunity to become engaged in STEM fields, in tech and AI, to become a founder and entrepreneur, we are going to fail in this country and fail to create the prosperity that we desperately need as we go forward in a very challenging world. We have with us today, I know Nancy Gardner, president of FedDev, is with us. She and the agency have enabled us to create the ScaleUp platform that Erin is a part of, that our venture team leads, that we have built out a women founders and owners strategy for 6 years with the subcommittee of our board. We have been tracking the number of women founders and working hard with our community to create more opportunities to build that robust pipeline of women founders from every walk of life. And while we're not there yet, we are making progress. And lastly, in a country of 44 million, if we don't activate absolutely every single person and help them to fulfill their economic potential in this country, we will be at a loss. We will never create the thriving, robust economy that we need. And so if we are not all engaged in what is not just an opportunity, but an imperative, we will fail. So that's number one. While we were sitting listening to this great panel on AI, I also did search in ChatGPT about when the transfer of wealth, this massive transfer of wealth I keep hearing about, is expected to happen, where there will be a massive concentration in the hands of women from the baby boomers. And it is expected to be $30 to $40 trillion. And there were two dates that it provided: 2030, 5 years away, and 2048. We have an opportunity, because when women control wealth and they have more decision-making authority, there is more benefit to things in areas like health, clean tech, a more sustainable environment, a more equitable society. There is an opportunity, and I am now getting very focused with our subcommittee of the board. I sent Jennifer Francis, who's with us, a text saying, we're going to talk about this because it's an opportunity for Canada and for our world. Now, we're going to move into our next panel, which is really, really critical as well. We're going to talk about women's health. It's not just a niche issue. It's half of the population. And yet, for far too long, it's been underfunded, under-researched, and overlooked. Globally, women make up 70% of healthcare workers, but hold only 25% of leadership positions. In Canada, women are twice as likely as men to experience delays in diagnosis, especially for conditions like heart disease, autoimmune disorders, and chronic pain. When it comes to research, a staggering 80% of drugs have been pulled from the market in the past few decades because there were greater health risks for women, because they were never properly tested on us. This is not just a health issue, it's an economic issue and imperative, a productivity issue, and a human rights issue. And a world grappling with aging populations, workforce shortages, and economic uncertainty, investing in women's health is not simply the right thing to do, it is a smart thing to do, and it is a must-have. So today, this conversation, generously supported by our friends at Calian, brings together these amazing leaders to my left, and we're going to talk about why women's health is not an afterthought, but a priority. So let's dive in. With the incredible women leaders on this panel, I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your passion for why you believe women's health is so critical and why you've chosen the career path you have. Let's start with Deborah. Oh, there we go.
Thank you so much, Sonya. My name is Deborah Lehman. I'm the president and CEO of the Ottawa Cancer Foundation. I'm also a certified grief educator. But what particularly defines me, I think, is that I was a caregiver for both my parents for 16 years of my life. How many of you have been a caregiver or know someone who's been a caregiver for someone they love? That's a fair amount of people. The caregiving journey for me, I can say for the first time publicly, was traumatic. There were days where I thought I couldn't keep going. There were days I wanted to die with my parents. And there were days I kept going and had faith and hope. I learned so much from that experience. It made me who I am today. I'm more resilient, I'm more resourceful, I'm stronger, and I brought those skills that I learned over that 16 years into my life and into my leadership. And that's why I am passionate about women's health and particularly about caregiving and women and the journey they go on every day.
Oh my gosh, Deborah, you're gonna make me cry. It's very emotional. Thank you for sharing. Hi, everyone. My name is Dallas, and I am the founder and CEO of a femtech company called Brea Health. In my spare time, I'm also an advisor for Femtech Canada, which is an innovation and ecosystem here in Canada for women's health companies, researchers, and other ecosystem players to get involved. Why I am particularly interested, and I think many other women's health tech founders can relate to this, is from my own personal experience. I was admitted to the hospital twice because of adverse reactions I had to my birth control. And I had to take a medical leave of absence from school. And this is actually what inspired the founding of Brea Health, which is a digital platform for personalized contraceptive counseling and hormonal health management. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nancy. I've spent the last 30 years of my career focused in healthcare, starting in women's health. I spent 2 decades working in big pharma across the globe. I've seen disparity across not only gender issues, but research issues. I then went on for 5 years to be the CEO of a genetic testing startup company. And for the last 1.5 years, I've joined Calian, a local Ottawa company. I'm a vice president in the health division, where we specialize in access and delivery of quality healthcare. I'm incredibly passionate about women's health, and it's finally having a moment in a way it hasn't before. So I look forward to this panel and maybe even talking about the menopause word as we dive into this panel a little later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. What she didn't say is when we had like our initial meeting call, it was like perimenopause, menopause was like the top discussion we were all talking about before getting to the topics. Hi, everyone. My name is Leanne Lang. I'm the president of the Ottawa Heart Institute Foundation. I've been there almost 5 years, and it's been a game changer for me. I'm so passionate, and I love the ability to be able to talk about just heart disease, heart health, but also be networked into the community. We have an incredible community, and something that I learned because I did spend 20 years working in television with Bell Media. So really connected to the community that way. I found when I was doing the show over the 20 years, health and wellness was like my favorite passion. It was my favorite guests. I loved when I got to interview doctors, nutritionists, anything that had to do with health. So I knew that that was where my passion really was when I left television. But the interesting part of me coming over to the foundation work and into philanthropy was my dad died really young of a heart attack. He died he had just turned 57 the day before. It was 2 weeks before my wedding. And it was like a big pivot in my life in terms of getting through that. And then once I got to the Heart Institute, I kind of went in with the mission that I didn't want any other daughter to experience not having their dad walk them down the aisle. And that 80% of heart disease is preventable with physical activity and diet. I'll get into the women's heart health in just a second or later in the conversation. But it was crazy when I got there and I started to learn about heart disease and the impact on women, and to understand that it is the #1 killer of women worldwide. It's 1 in 3, very different symptoms, very different risk factors than men. That also became a huge role for us in creating an event called Jump In for Women's Heart Health, which is something that we're doing across the country. So looking forward to talking about that and hopefully putting some radars out there for some of you to really understand your own risk factors and symptoms as women and not as men.
Perfect. Thank you. My name is Dania Burton. I'm the pharmacist team leader at the Ottawa Hospital. I'm also the residency coordinator, so I help train pharmacists in a year to become hospital pharmacists. And I'm also a student placement coordinator for pharmacists at TOH. When I do work clinically, I get to cover patients in general medicine. Initially, I went into pharmacy because I just really loved helping people. But as my career has progressed and just as my parents are aging, I'm finding that I'm just very happy to be in this space. I do believe that health is our most valuable asset. And I feel like a lot of the resources and knowledge that I do have, I'm able to help my friends and family and community. And I adore that. I have 2 boys, and I did have kids later on in life. So I calculate, I think the other day I calculated I will be 71 when my littlest one is 30. And I do have a clear vision of like the type of person I want to be at 70. And I want to be very active with them and enjoy the most out of life. And I know that there are disparities currently with the healthcare, with how the evidence for women's health and things like that. So every day I listen to podcasts and try to get more knowledgeable. I do believe knowledge is power as well. So just very passionate about health overall.
This is going to be an incredible discussion, as you can see. A lot of wealth, a lot of expertise. And what we talked about leading up to today is we're going to make it like a kitchen table discussion where it's as if you're listening to a very intimate conversation among women who have had lots of different experiences but bring lots of expertise to bear. And it's all about advancing advocacy and action. That is our theme today. I'd like to open up with your perceptions on the state of women's health, perhaps in our province, in this country. I mean, we had a lot of international elements that folded into the last panel as well. There's a lot of challenges that you've spoken to. What do you think are the most pressing issues that don't get enough attention today? Who wants to jump in?
Mental health. Sorry, that was loud. I know that it's been an extremely difficult year and many years prior, and we are doing better with mental health, but I feel it needs to be normalized more, and there needs to be conversation about it, and people need to be included in conversations. And I think that there are some who are still not at the table. And once you bring everyone to the table, then you're going to see change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now within women's health is a really incredible time to get involved. There's a lot of really amazing innovations and things happening. I think what we really have to pay attention to in this next iteration of women's health in Canada is delivering more culturally sensitive care, and how can we take all of these incredible innovations that are having so much impact across the country and get it to the folks who arguably could need it the most. As an example, we work in reproductive and sexual health, and I've shared this stat whenever I'm on stage pitching Rhea Health. But in 2023, out of the female international student population in Ontario, 40% of them had a pregnancy termination. Clearly, there's an inadequate level of support and information for newcomers to Canada and other intersexual barriers within our Canadian population.
I can add, I think one thing that's really critically important for all of us is we have to get comfortable talking about uncomfortable topics, because we have a tendency to sometimes wash over issues or try to generalize them. And as we think about women's health, the evolution of women's health in the future, I think the number one thing we can do beyond being advocates for our own health is speaking up for either marginalized or underrepresented populations and helping support a strong communication agenda around that.
I'm looking forward to unpacking that advocacy opportunity very soon. Tanya, I would love to hear from you as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think this is an important topic to discuss. Although women are living longer, we are suffering with more anxiety and depression. And then I think it also stems back to looking at the research and which populations were originally included. And we talked about primarily it was the white male that was the primary subject. And so we have a lot of good evidence, I think, to support that population. But I think now we're realizing that there are gaps and people are advocating and realizing that the care is not equal amongst different groups. And actually last night I was Googling about mental health, and the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, there's actually a current poll going on to support research in women's health, and they're asking for donations to help support women's health. So I think it's been identified as an issue. I think the research before wasn't supporting, but I feel like now people are really aware, and I think I'm excited to see like where that research will go now that it's highlighted more as an issue for us.
And I'd just like to add one thing. Like, you look around this room, there are women here who are looking to empower themselves with information and with knowledge and are supporting women. So I do think that really exists. But I think a lot of this falls on the men. They need to be our biggest support system as well, and they need to be advocating that it's okay that we are fundraising and talking about and researching. I mean, with heart disease, 70% of all of the research was done on men. But when we launched Jump In for Women's Heart Health, which is 1 month of a 12-month calendar, I got more complaints from men in my interactions of, why are you doing a whole month of fundraising for women when there are men having heart attacks? So it's changing the dialogue a little bit. Like we're sitting here and we're all like going for women empowerment, but at the same time, the half the population still needs to get behind it and realize that these are our wives and our daughters and our sisters and our mothers. Like, we need that support no matter what to be able to further enhance anything that's being done. And so we can yell from the rooftops, but unless we have the buy-in from everyone, I don't think we're going to advance ourselves as much as we'd like to.
One of the most important messages that we've shared about International Women's Month is that it's everyone working together. We need all champions, allies to support this objective because it benefits everyone. It lifts our whole economy, our whole society, and women's health is critical to our society more broadly. Advocacy is something that we've spent a lot of time talking about in the lead up to today's panel. I know many women who have had many difficult health journeys and have really come through as shining stars because they advocated for themselves, and I believe their lives were saved because they did it. Can you talk a little bit about the need and how women can best advocate for their own health, for their future?
I'm happy to start. I think this really boils down to, again, you need to know yourself. And if something doesn't feel right, you need the courage and confidence to speak up. What happens oftentimes is, again, someone had commented on women and their buying power and their capabilities as pretty much the center of the family, not just for themselves, but their spouse, their children, their extended family. There's not a lot of time or energy left over when you get to the end of the day or week for yourself. So really just, if something doesn't feel right, question it and find that allyship and support. But it again starts with the individual and finding those allies who can either validate, support you, or help you through that journey of arriving at, some answers.
Can I jump in on the heart health just in case some of you want to jot down notes? So we talk about advocating. So really quickly, 70% of all the research was done on men, and yet heart disease is the #1 killer of women, affecting 1 in 3. A lot of the times, that 1/3 of that will come before the age of 65 with major heart incidences. We present differently. Our risk factors are different. And I just want to, because we're in a room with so many women, the risk factors differ because of our hormones. And so if you were early to have your first period, if you were early to puberty, that is something to look at later in life and have a discussion with your doctor. If you had difficulty with your pregnancy, if you had preeclampsia, if you had brought on early diabetes, if you had an early arrival, if your baby was either underweight or overweight, these are all risk factors that you need to consider. Usually when the baby is born healthy, the obstetrician or the surgeon, they're just happy that a healthy baby arrived and everyone is good and mom's alive, baby's alive, and off they go. What they need to be saying is you had a high-risk pregnancy. You need to be staying on top of your own heart health because this is one of the leading risk factors later in life. Also, we are now going through the hormonal changes at puberty. The same thing is happening in menopause. And so when women are also presenting with a heart attack, oftentimes we imagine the Hollywood heart attack of a man grabbing his chest and all of a sudden he's in a restaurant and down he goes. That is not often the case when we're talking with women. Plus, we tend to identify, because we're descriptive, we tend to identify that we have this, but we also have this, which then leads the doctor to kind of go, she's got anxiety, there's high stress. And often because we're so descriptive, we tend to then have 3 or more symptoms. A man will describe it as having a really heavy chest pain. And while a woman will have chest pain as well, she'll maybe describe it more as dull-like, or that it's a pressure, and that it's also happening in the neck or along the arms. For women, we have more excessive sweating, something to consider, fatigue, a bit of weakness, hello menopause. Like these are all, you're talking about excessive sweating and you're going through hot flashes. So there's lots of things to be able to consider when you're actually having these conversations. But if you have any of those risk factors, something to really consider, and having your blood work done earlier than later, and to keep that in mind. One thing is, the biggest thing is 80% of heart disease is preventable. The only thing that's not preventable is your age and your family history. So I know I lost my dad young and I lost his dad young. So I'm very aware that I have family history and need to be staying on top of a lot of these. But the emphasis on 30 minutes of physical activity a day is a game changer. And it might seem like nothing, but it's a huge part of your own heart health. Watching for non-smokers, diabetes, blood pressure, getting your sleep. So when you're looking at what you can do, sometimes you actually have to take responsibility and start changing some of those risk factors. So just a couple things to consider, but also for those that saw any of those risk factors earlier in life, please, this is like the sign. It will present earlier in life, and we see, unfortunately, when I look at the list of patients, there's a lot more women than you think.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that about the pregnancy risk conditions. Thank you. What I would say is to find tools that work for you and tools that feel like they're supporting you with your own medical literacy, your own body literacy, and your confidence in what can oftentimes be really intimidating conversations with a doctor. I think as a side to that, our structures and our medical system prioritizing creating safe spaces and spaces where people do feel safe to share and to actually come to their doctor's appointments. Many folks avoid the doctor because it's a scary place or traumatic place for them. Back to the whole tool thing, I think it can be as simple as writing down notes before you go and talk to a medical professional, and having a pen and paper with you to like write down things that happen, to share it with somebody else, or to just, have that. I do that all the time. All the way into other technologies and tools that you can use. We really try and be a tool for folks and for young people at Rhea Health. We help outline boundaries when it comes to using a new contraceptive. So what are the potential risks? What are the potential symptoms you could experience when trying a new option? And what are you comfortable with? Having a conversation with yourself about these things and to understand, your own tolerances, your own boundaries when it comes to your health can be a game changer. And just being able to have the language to describe what you're experiencing and really what the outcomes are that you're looking for.
I wanted to also comment on something very important for us at the Ottawa Cancer Foundation. If you are not happy with or feel this niggling, I'm not sure I feel right about this conversation that you're having with any of your healthcare professionals, it's okay. You can have another conversation with another healthcare professional. That might not be easy, but it's something you can try to do, because there could be another way. There could be a reason why you have these symptoms, and there are guidelines, and young women who go in and present with certain symptoms may not get a requisition for breast screening. They may not get a requisition for what they need, and they could have cancer. And some women are courageous, and they go and they get that requisition, and they have the test, and they get their answers. So that is my advice also, is to use your instinct. Use your instinct.
I did an interview with CTV earlier this week with respect to International Women's Month, and the journalist was asking me about, tips for women founders and how to have courage and to start a business. And one of the things that I concluded with was be relentless. So for anyone in this room, and that goes for every single person here, if you believe something is wrong and your doctor is telling you otherwise and you know that it is not right, be relentless, because it can save your life. I've seen it. Taboo topics. We spoke about, thank you. Relentless. It's one of my favorite words this week. We talked a lot about taboo topics. We mentioned some of the mental health, menopause, fertility. There are so many important topics that we need to bring out into the public sphere and to be discussing more openly to ensure that women and their spouses and their allies have that confidence to engage in those discussions publicly, to educate others. What can we do to start changing that dialogue? We talk about it a lot. I'm tired of the talk. We need to drive action. What can we do to drive that action?
We need more investment, because it is embarrassing how much funding actually goes specifically to women's health. And it is literally less than 5%. I mean, that's shocking. So I think that's one place to start. But again, it's the dialogue around what are we solving for? So we need more investment.
Maybe I'll just add one thing. I think I 100% agree with the investment piece. I think sometimes it can be like you feel a bit stressful, or not stressful, maybe not the right word, but you're worried because maybe the system's not set up to treat you right away and the investments aren't there yet. And it can leave you in a place of, waiting. And so one of the things that I've found very helpful is like, as much things that are within my power, I'm going to try to do. Like, I'd like to try to stay outside of the healthcare system as much as I can. So like the things you talk about, the exercise, that there's such excellent evidence for exercise. You think about our risk of getting osteoporosis. I think we are 4 times more likely to get osteoporosis. If you go to the osteoporosis website, you'll see clear exercises and the benefits of doing weight-bearing exercises. As we get over 40, we start to lose muscle mass. Like understanding what our bodies are going through and have a really good idea so you can really understand your body and do what's best for it, I think is so helpful. And you mentioned when you come to hospital, people who are described as like poor historians, or people who don't really know even when their symptoms happened, what medications they're on, why they're taking medications. These people have like delays in the ability to get effective care. So you want to become an excellent historian. You do want to be able to document when you tried new herbals or new medications or new things, so that when you come there, you're very well educated on your own health. So I think as much as you can, like whatever you can do in your own power to become a healthy individual, like take that time to become very knowledgeable in those areas.
I appreciate you saying all of that, because we're looking for answer and we need investment, but the investment needs to start in the home. It needs to start with yourself, and you need to invest in yourself. And I think our leaders, as a leader in my organization, I'm very big on health as a huge advocacy. I encourage go and get in a workout, go and get in a walk, get up from your desk, go. I honestly believe people are way more productive if they've had an outlet. I have people, and my staff know I don't start until 9:15 because I've blocked my morning workouts and my morning activity, and it helps me to miss traffic. And so my meetings start at 9:15, but it's a blocked time. And I think women need to block appointments. We do it for our kids. We block in all of these errands that we have to do, kids to this, going to this. Why aren't you blocking in an hour a day for yourself? And it is that investment. And it's by investing in ourselves, we're taking the pressure off of the healthcare system. Like, it's a trickle effect. And it's a simple thing. It's a simple thing to do. And so I strongly encourage, if you have the ability to lead your teams, to be able to encourage that, or encourage them to take the lunch hour or start a little bit later or run the errand. The less stressed they are, I think the better that we have as productivity, and as for a lot of us as mothers. But you have to take the responsibility yourself. We can go through all of the stats and everything you have to do, but if you're leaving it for someone else to fix it, that's not going to happen. It has to be done. You have to take the initiative.
I think to echo a lot of this is like the sentiment that any good movement starts locally. And so locally with yourself, with your family, your own community. And I think, yes, we need more than just talking about it, but also I encourage every single person here today to go home and tell somebody new a fact or like some takeaway from today and from this panel or from any of the panels. I think, we see it all the time in the funding landscape, like the male investor has to go home and talk to their wife because they had never heard about this before. Anything that we can do to start to normalize these conversations, even in the home, within our families, within our friends and our community, it goes a long way.
Awesome. We have 5 minutes left before we're going to open up for questions. I'm very passionate about making sure that we are elevating women in leadership. We need more women in the C-suite. If we don't have organizations building products with diverse people, then we will never have diverse products that meet the needs of everyone. That certainly came up in the AI panel as well. What do you think we need to do to get more women in leadership in the healthcare space? I'd love to start with you because you're a founder, you're leading a company. We're passionate about founders and entrepreneurs here at Invest Ottawa, and then looking across the broader C-suite leaders that are here today.
I mean, that was loud. An obvious or an easiest answer, I think, is representation, and having representation on events like this. I think that goes a long way on any kind of investor panel. I personally take note whenever I go to an event, whether it be a tech conference or an investor fireside chat, who they have on the stage and were they intentional about the representation on the stage. Because if they are really trying to foster diversity and foster and lift others up and have more women being a part of the conversation at the table and have that equitability and that parity, it's walking the talk. And so I think that's something that we can all take away with and look for sure.
Companies are more productive, they're more profitable, they thrive when there's more diversity at the leadership level. It's a fact.
We absolutely need more allyship and sponsorship. We talk a lot about mentoring, and mentoring is fine, but until our male counterparts really take on an active role in sponsoring those talents that have aptitude, capability, and runway, we need to do a lot more of that. But as a female executive, I make it a priority to seek out the younger female up-and-coming talents and take the time, give them the time to help them build with their confidence, give them stretch assignments so they can learn new skills and really fill that pipeline of ready now talent to be promoted.
Amazing. Tanya.
I find it very rewarding too to start with very young children. So sometimes I will, there's a colleague of mine I used to play basketball with, and now she's a teacher. She's a healthcare teacher. And so I'll try to visit the healthcare class and just show representation and try to introduce myself and show them that they can 100% be in this role and do this role and kind of like share just my expertise is something I like to do. I find if the kids have a vision and they don't have any perceived barriers, I feel like people are really good at just striving for those dreams. So even creating a vision of what it could look like is something that I find really helpful.
See her, you can be her. We need more role models, and we need to shine a very big spotlight on them to inspire the next generation.
I'm just going to quickly add that I tend to attend a lot of events in this beautiful city we have. And I make a point of, I notice the leaders that are there. I make a point of seeking out those that I don't know and finding those women and hearing about their stories and encouraging them to keep moving and to speak and to come to other events and to share their story, because we have a lot to learn from younger women.
Amazing. Excellent. All right, I think we're going to move to questions. Well, look at all the hands that have just jumped up. We're going to start with Liz Elwood.
First off, thank you to all of you. Sonya, you put together an incredible panel of like professional women in Ottawa leading change and beyond. And thank you for that, because these events are pivotal to changing so much that needs to change. I'm lucky enough to be an 18-year cancer survivor. And I'm sure if I looked around this whole room and asked, have you or someone you care about had cancer that's a female in your life? Can you put your hand up? That's a lot of people, right? And that's just one condition. But I just want to say something I learned very young that I hope will resonate with this room. And that's that this is a room full of professional women and of course male allies, and we all deeply care about our careers and the work we're doing, and we're a very motivated room of people. But more than anything, you know, before your job, before anything else, your first job is your health. Because if you lose your health, you will lose everything else. And so everything you do every day, make sure it's in support and it's contributing to your health. And that's Googling, and that's researching, and that's figuring out what's going on with your symptoms and advocating. If a doctor says to you, I don't think this is an issue, and you still think it is, you push back. That doctor does not get to tell you what's going on with your own body. So please make it your priority. Take care of yourself. It will save your life. I know it saved mine, and I know it saves many women, but I also know the women who didn't push back and are not on the other side of it. So please just take care of yourselves, because we need to take care of each other, but we need to take care of ourselves first. Put the oxygen mask on.
Be relentless. Be relentless. Amazing. Thanks, Liz.
Again, thank you to Invest Ottawa for hosting this fantastic day. I am a 16-year champion of endometriosis and anomyosis. March is Endometriosis Awareness Month. So I was diagnosed when I was 27, was promoted to a new job, going to go to a new city, and the rug was pulled out from underneath me. And then 16 years of precarious work in between. And then in my 40s, better doctors, new surgeries, and I got back on my feet again and went back to school. And so now I'm studying data science and AI. So my question to this panel actually brings in the previous panel. So I've done programs in enterprise architecture, bioinformatics, and my current program is in data science and AI. And through my courses in machine learning and looking at the tools that are being used to develop AI, those libraries also have built-in biases. And so then when you put it on data that's missing or has gender biases or just has women missing from the equation, that's a bigger predicament. So my question to the group of experts that have presented before and now, how do we start addressing those inadequacies?
Can I jump in? What a fantastic question, and it really brings everything together. So I mean, I know at the Heart Institute, we have a huge investment in our new data science center. And so much of what our campaign is about is on research. What our researchers have found, especially the data scientists, is that there wasn't the initial question of are you male or are you female to start the entire process of the research. And so I know that the Canadian Women's Heart Health Centre, which is something that we power through the Heart Institute, has started an entirely new database for all of Canada, which has changed the dialogue in that the first question needs to be, are you male or female, so that you can actually go into the main data frame of trying to build out a database that's on this. But it was something that was lacking right from day one. So it's a pivotal topic. I know that there's a huge investment in data science and in ensuring that women are at the forefront of a lot of this, just because we are so behind. But it is a fascinating world to see, you know, that this, like even in medical science, just the scientists, the data itself is so integral for future decisions and future treatments.
Amazing, thank you. Got a couple more questions, and I don't know how much more time. I'm going to look for Audrey. 2 more questions, okay.
Yeah, my question is just around female and leadership roles in the C-suite, like you guys were talking about, and how we balance that with motherhood. So my first leadership role was at 27. I'm facing a formal, more highest you can go leadership role, but also facing the balance of having a second baby and enjoying that. So what would be your recommendation on your goals versus your personal goals and how to feel like you're not going to be left behind?
That balance is very tricky. Who would like to address that?
I want to say that like your goals need to include your personal goals as well. Professional goals and personal goals, I think they need to be combined, because we can't be all things to all people, and they're equally important. And having a family, like that's a finite period of time in your life, right? So don't let that pass you by. And I love the speaker on the AI panel who, you know, talked about how she reframed her resume. It's a shame she had to do that, but I think it's a great tip nonetheless. So don't, I wouldn't say you have to choose. I think it's prioritize what's important to you.
I'm not a parent, but what I would say is that I think we have to, being in the workforce and being employees, being leaders, we have to think about how we can make our workplaces equitable, not just equal, but how can we make them equitable for all of these different experiences. We can all agree that having women in the workforce is a good thing. And so how can we actually support that and actually support that for the future? And what does that look like? McKinsey actually did a study last year, I believe, and or sorry, I'm getting them confused, but it was a women in the workplace study around women's health. And it said that 77% of women lose 1 to 5 days every month due to women's health issues and women's related issues. And that's thousands of dollars per employee per year. This now becomes an economic decision and an economic issue and question for workplaces, and making them equitable for families and for parents and for people of diverse genders is an economic decision and an economic driver.
From my perspective, as an employer and as a leader, if you support parents, you support families, you support children, you build capacity, and that just makes everyone better, everyone happier, and your workplace better too. Because you are modeling and you are showing and you are forging a path that makes people understand that families are a priority as well, and that parenting is a huge job and it's a leadership role, and that the skills that we encourage parents to have, that comes into the workplace as well. It's a ripple effect, and it's capacity building right across the board.
The people in this room have an opportunity to redesign the system, to break down barriers, to create greater access and greater opportunity for everyone to thrive, whether you're a parent, you're not a parent, regardless of age, stage, gender. There is so much that we can do, and I'm grateful to everyone in this room that came here today, because I know that you're all invested in this objective. Thank you so much to the incredible leaders who took time to share their knowledge and expertise with us. Thank you all for being here. We're going to hand it back over to Erin.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, what an amazing panel. I think so much resonated with each of us in the room, and I hope we're all feeling more comfortable and equipped to have those uncomfy conversations with our doctors and the men in our lives and our friends as well. So thank you, Sonya, for leading that. We're doing great for time, which they said it couldn't be done. They said it couldn't be done, and we're doing really well. So we're going to take a quick break. Remember, by attending today, I committed you without your consent or knowledge that you are going to help someone else in the room. So be sure when you're networking, have that in mind. There's some food over there, and we're going to return real quick. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back from the break. I have a confession. I did a really bad job at keeping time at the break, but I didn't want to interrupt you guys. Yeah. Everybody had homework to do. Everybody had to connect with someone. So thank you everyone for coming back to the break. We have a great fireside chat now. Please welcome once again Sonya Shorey, President and CEO of Invest Ottawa, to the stage, and Justine Hendricks, President and CEO of FCC, for a fireside chat all about from vision to action, building a more sustainable and competitive agricultural future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin. I think Erin deserves an incredible round of applause. She is one of our many amazing leaders here at Invest Ottawa, and we are so proud to collaborate with her. I'm very excited to have a friend and a leader that is doing an outstanding job in our country and our world on a very important topic. And I wanted to introduce this panel with a few important notes. Agriculture is not just about feeding people. It's about feeding economies, prosperity, fueling innovation, and securing the future of our planet and its people. And in today's world, where food security, sustainability, and technology are at the heart of global challenges and opportunities, leadership in this space has never been more critical. Here in Canada, we are a global leader in agri-food innovation. We produce enough food to feed over 200 million people, 5 times our population. Yet, climate volatility, economic uncertainty, and shifting global trade dynamics mean that how we produce food, how we sustain food, how we drive prosperity in this sector matters more than ever, and it takes leaders who are driving innovation, and Justine certainly is. FCC is at the forefront of this transformation, investing in farmers, food producers, and the technology that will design and develop the next generation of agricultural innovation and its people. Under Justine's leadership, FCC is tackling these challenges head on, advancing sustainability, technology adoption, and innovation in a sector that is not only vital to our economy, but to Canada's global leadership. I also want to extend a very heartfelt thank you to you, Justine, for your critical support of the Ottawa Smart Farm at AreaX.O, where we collaborate with you, your team, so many founders, companies, researchers, and innovators. Our team at AreaX.O is on site, and they are watching remotely. We could not do what we do without you, so thank you so much for driving here in Ottawa.
Thank you.
So today we're going to dive into what it takes to lead in this space, the role of innovation in feeding a growing and more complex world, and how Canada continue to strengthen its position as a powerhouse in sustainable agriculture. Let's get started. I can't wait to hear about your leadership journey. You have had an incredible journey throughout so many spheres of this particular field. Tell us about your journey so far.
So my life journey or my leadership journey at FCC?
One
is a little bit longer than the other.
I'm going to say, give us highlights of your leadership journey overall that led you to FCC.
Okay, so I started my career at the Royal Bank, and I did about 10 years at the Royal Bank, and then I got this great opportunity to go and work for another crown, Export Development Canada. And at EDC, I was very fortunate to be able to see the different lines of business. So I did a bit of insurance. I worked in front of customers. And at one point I was tapped to go and to help transform some of the financing business. I ended up being Export Development Canada's first Chief Sustainability Officer. And then along that journey, my phone rang and somebody said, hey, there's a job to be the CEO of Farm Credit Canada, and we'd love you to consider to apply. So I did, and I guess 2 years later, here I am today.
And as one of our featured leaders for International Women's Month as a whole, we always choose based on attributes and values, outstanding leaders who are lifting fellow women and creating new opportunity. What would you say is the most defining moment of your leadership journey when you look back?
So there's quite a few, but those that know me know that I always like to tell stories in terms of painting a picture of what some of those life lessons are. So the story that came to mind when this question came, it was not just from a leadership point of view, but it was more as an individual, what we all contribute to this world and how you do it and when it eventually comes back to you. So when I started at EDC, and at one point in my career at EDC, I was responsible for the resource sector. And resource sector actually included forestry, it included agriculture equipment, and a few other things. And along the journey, I used to spend a lot of time in Winnipeg because Winnipeg is a big hub for agricultural equipment, and Canada is quite prominent in the world. We go head to head with John Deere, and we do some pretty innovative stuff in agriculture. And there was one company, and one of the first deals that I ever did at EDC was for a company, AGI, out of Manitoba that does on-farm storage, so bins. But they were super innovative, and believe it or not, this transaction was to do something in the one of the ports in Russia, because Russia was a big hub for them, and it was to be able to figure out how they could offload from ships. And ships in the Black Sea have to park quite far from the shore, so they needed to do something pretty unique. And EDC ended up financing it. But it was my first time that I went in front of a credit committee at EDC. I worked super hard with the company, and I still remember being in my house the night before at 10 o'clock talking to the CEO and giving him my word that I would give my best to get the deal done, which we did. That deal, believe it or not, put them on the map. AGI, and it's not because of me, that's not the point, I'm saying this story, but it was a super important moment for that company. They went global, they ended up going public, and to this day, hugely successful. So what was interesting is when I got the job at FCC, probably in the first month at FCC, I was going around the different offices, and a staff member in Montreal comes and sees me and says, Justine, I was out west last week, and there was an event of investors and so forth. And do you know the name Gary Anderson? And I said, oh my God, Gary Anderson, of course I remember. And so Gary was the CEO at the time of AGI. And so when he met the staff from FCC, he said, the only reason I'm here today and we're as successful is because of one girl. And her name is Justine Hendricks. And that, my friends, is something like 17 years later. So it's not 2 years later. And then he basically said, you are so lucky to have this girl as your CEO. So for me, the lesson there was every day counts. Everything you do matters. And sometimes those gifts, when they come back, you typically don't expect it, but they often tend to come back in the moments where you probably need it most. So when they do, cherish them, but just remember that everything you do can make a difference.
What a beautiful story. And I know everyone in this room has moments just like that we have influenced and impacted something really important of the change of a life of another person. I really, really admire your values. And I know in a world that which we're living in, tariffs, trade war, anti-woke sentiment, there are so many challenges. And that includes, of course, sustainability, things like ESG, where there's a lot of negative discussion currently. And you're a force for positivity and change and light and impact. Can you describe some of the concrete actions that you're leading at FCC in the area that will drive meaningful long-term change in agriculture?
Sure. So maybe what I'll do is I'll take 30 seconds and explain what we do at FCC. So FCC is a financial crown corporation, so similar like Business Development Bank and Export Development Bank. What's really cool at FCC, because I can do my pitch, right? Since I'm here on I can do my pitch. So we are the only lender in Canada that is 100% dedicated to ag and food. So whether it's seed, farming equipment, processing, transformation, all the way through when the food is exporting, we can finance that. We also do investing, right? So different forms of capital. We also give advice. So we have advisory services. And I know a little bit later, we'll probably talk about a software platform that we have that directly connects to sustainability. So FCC has been in existence for 65 years. We have about 102,000 customers across Canada, 106 branches. Most of them are in rural communities. And the overall book of FCC is starting to get close to $60 billion. So it's quite a big player in the world of ag and food. So that's kind of what we do day in, day out. So we live and breathe agriculture and food every single day. So you asked me about what are we doing concretely? So if I may, and I'll start on the tariff side, right? Yes. So you won't be surprised with everything that's been going down south. When you think of ag and food and possible 25% tariffs or who knows, right? Because they change every 15 minutes. You can imagine that fresh fruits and vegetables, livestock, and so forth that tend to go north-south will get impacted immediately, right? So from an ag and food perspective, it's actually the stress level in the industry is over 65%, and we track that on a biweekly basis. So what ends up happening as a result of this is a lot of unknowns. And I mean, I'm sure you've been hearing on the news everywhere, you don't just snap your fingers and say, hey, I was selling to the US, so why don't I go to even Mexico, or maybe I go overseas. You can't just flip that on a dime and make it happen. So in order to support the industry through what we know is going to be super tumultuous times, we've stood up a set of programs. So we will go one-on-one with our different customers and non-customers, actually, because we know that cash flow is going to be the area that's going to hit them the first. So, we've got ability to extend credit on a short-term basis. We can often go in and renegotiate to extend, interest payments and so forth. One of the probably the secret sauce or the secret ingredients at FCC, it is because we're close to customers. So we'll be out on the field. We have over 1,200 staff across Canada. So we'll be going to see all the customers to check in, to make sure that everything is okay. And if they need something related to their facilities, that we're there. And maybe the other thing, because I was eavesdropping on the previous panel as well, is a few weeks ago, we actually partnered with Guelph University, and we launched a 1-800 line specifically for the farm and food industry to support them with mental wellness, because it is actually a sector, believe it or not, where mental wellness or challenges is perhaps the highest. So those are some of the things we're doing.
Leadership in action right there. That is a huge development for our farming community. And we see it. We see it here in Ottawa with the producers we work at through the Ottawa Smart Farm. Thank you for taking that step. I was not even aware of that. Technology is revolutionizing agriculture. It's boosting efficiency, creating profitability, opportunities for sustainability. FCC is a major partner, not just in the Ottawa Smart Farm here, which is all about putting technology to work to support those very goals with producers here in the region and agri-tech companies, but across the country. We're part of a constellation. When you think about the potential for technology to revolutionize sustainable agriculture and create a more efficient, healthy, sustainable, and more secure food source, what would you say is your vision around that?
So I'll expand the vision beyond ag tech, and I'll share with you what we've coined in the last 12 months when we actually take a look at the ag and food industry in Canada, which I fundamentally believe is an absolute powerhouse. The challenge we have in Canada, and certainly the pitch I want to do with all of you, is this is a pretty kick-ass industry. It's responsible for 1 in 9 jobs in Canada. It's 7% of the GDP. It's the second largest manufacturing sector for this country. The ag and food industry is faced with what we call a generational opportunity. So that's an opportunity that's never happened before. And it can basically solve 4 major global problems: health, hunger, climate, and be a huge driver of economic growth. So think of another industry that's able to do that, but to actually solve all 4 at once. There's only one. It's ag and food. So it's so important in terms of us coming together for the industry and actually bringing that story abroad in terms of what we can do. And ag tech is at the very heart of that, right? In terms of how can we be better in a position to scale in Canada. So think too about what's going on vis-a-vis our neighbors down south. The ability for Canada to scale, the ability for Canada to be able to process and transform more in Canada, and the ability to take actually the safe and high quality food that we make and to actually bring it to around the world is part of that generational opportunity.
The first time I met Justine, we were at a conference together. I was on a panel on smart farms. I think you had just started, and you were so excited about taking everything you were seeing on that stage international. And I remember thinking, this is a visionary leader, and we do need to raise Canada's visibility and opportunity in this space. It is incredibly powerful. You get the chance to meet so many innovators, companies every single day. Tell us about some of the most exciting innovations that you've seen, maybe a couple here in Ottawa, perhaps, just to be a little bit biased.
Yes, yes.
Would love that.
Oh my God, there's just so many. So for one, AI, and I know that there's been conversation about artificial intelligence. Think about the application of artificial intelligence in farming, right? Because a lot of the activities they do is repetitive, right? So one of the stories I love to take as an illustration of some of the technology that you see out there is greenhouses. Think in the middle of the winter, Alberta and strawberries, which we don't usually get Canadian strawberries in the middle of the winter. But here you have a greenhouse where when you go in there, you've got all these different robots all over the place. And imagine if you had a robot picking a strawberry, and a strawberry is a pretty delicate fruit, right? So it picks a strawberry, but it gets better than that. And it basically does an EKG of every single strawberry that it picks. Right? So all the data from that they're collecting is to understand what's going on inside the fruit, outside the fruit, vis-a-vis the climate within the greenhouse. And this farmer is partnering with the University of British Columbia. They're downloading all the data to try to better understand and changes of temperature. How does that affect the quality of the plant, the yield, and so forth? So that would be an example of technology. So how does robotics come in and actually help you, but then overlay data on top of it? All of a sudden, what might take you 5-6 years in terms of improving your crops, you could probably do almost instantly, because you can apply that insight and that knowledge a lot faster. Drones, so that's near and dear to Sonya's heart at Area XO. But drones, imagine what they can do to help either for precision agriculture, right? Or be able for you to have a better overview of what's going on, some monitoring. So the drone technology that's being developed at Area XO is second to none. But imagine from another perspective, when you think of accessibility to the sector, right? One of the realities, if any of you decide or want to be a farmer one day, you're looking at a minimum $1 million, and you might just get a plot of land, right? A combine is $800,000, and you often need more than one. So it's becoming a sector, unfortunately, that is almost inaccessible. And we are faced with a reality where a lot of the current farmers are going to transition because they're getting too old. In Canada, I believe the statistics is more than 30% of farmers are going to retire. And in many cases, their children don't want to take over the farm. So imagine, so how can we make it more accessible? How can we use technology and maybe disrupt how farming is done? And also, I think I'll say the young farmers that come in and that want to do it may not want to do it like mom and dad or grandpa did, right? They do want to have a better work-life balance and so forth. So technology is essential to that. So the smartphone and you being able to monitor from a distance. And funny enough, I have the chair of the board of FCC. She lives in Edmonton, and she has a cattle farm with her partner. So her partner is the farmer, and I love it because she comes to Ottawa, and when it's calving season, her shift is 2 to 4 a.m. So she opens up the phone from Ottawa, and she's able to monitor and then see, and if something's going on, then she can send a signal. Like, imagine that, right? So she can play her part the other side of the country, but the only way she can do that is because of technology, and that's just scratching the surface of some of the things that are going on.
I'm going to be shameless because I'm passionate about all of the founders that we serve in our community. If all of you came in through the front door, baby, you probably saw to the right this great big pod, this beautiful grocer pod. Who saw it? Did you all see over on the left? Yeah. So that is Corey Ellis and Alita Burke's innovation. They are scaling the grocer. They have been part of the journey here in the Ottawa community for several years. I know FCC is passionate as well. That pod There are hundreds of them across North America in regions that are rural and remote, and you can grow produce minus 50 degrees Celsius, and it is becoming a transformative force inside economies in rural communities and Indigenous communities. We're so proud of the grocer and all the founders that we serve, but it speaks volumes that next generation of innovator is doing it differently.
Oh, totally. And there's another technology. It's not from Ottawa, but Sonya, she'll forgive me. But speaking of pods and containers, so like there's the container farming is becoming quite popular. So we actually funded for the food bank in Regina. We're doing a test pilot, and it's a container but focusing on growing greens. So why are we doing that, right? Because often when you need to leverage a food bank, it's often canned foods and things like that. So imagine the difference that it would make if we're able to include leafy greens and other fresh fruits and vegetables when we're serving the community. So we actually partnered with the food bank and an engineering company to design this container. It's a test pilot, and if it works, because it's literally in the parking lot, we're kind of take a look to see, can we bring more to go across Canada? So that too is an example, right, of doing farming in a different way, supporting a community and thinking from a healthy perspective for those that need it most.
We're so excited about this potential because we see so many technologies converging, as you've noted, with this incredible up and coming generation and the existing serial entrepreneurs. When you think about investment, I mean, FCC is playing an absolutely critical role in fueling this innovation. Why are these investments so important right now?
The investments are absolutely crucial right now because a lot of the dialogue that we're hearing across Canada, and I should say this, the dialogue that we're hearing today as a result of what happened in last November, I can't bring myself to say the name, is not because of that. And I think it's a super important point. So if Canada is going to improve its competitiveness and we need to improve our productivity, we needed to do that many years ago. So we're already behind and we have to catch up. And I think it's a super important point. And it's unfortunate that I was going to say our friend down there, but I don't know if we see him as a friend these days, is creating this burning platform. But hey, if it took that and we give ourselves a shake, so be it. So we need to drastically improve our productivity in Canada so that we can have an ability to scale. And maybe I'll give you a number. So if you go back in 2023, so if we all believe in this room that technology will play an important component to how our food is grown in Canada and around the world in order to keep up with the demands, right? So that's kind of our base case. In 2023, the total investments in ag tech in Canada was about $270 million, okay? In the United States, it's a minimum 6 times that. So if you were to normalize, right, in terms of what it should be at least 3 times that in Canada. So that's what I mean by we're behind, and it has to play a fundamental part. So we need to increase investments. So one of the things that we did at FCC is we kind of surveyed the market. And last April, as part of the new strategy, we decided to go back into co-investing. We're looking at different forms of capital because we're known mostly to be a senior secured lender. And I would tell you in the past 12 months, FCC alone is becoming one of the top leaders in AI investment in agriculture in all of Canada. We have deployed or invested over $200 million US. So if you think the 273, and our goal is to have deployed capital of up to $1 billion by 2030. It's huge, but those are the types of investments that need to take place. And we don't do it alone, right? We bring other investors with us because that's through where we believe we're going to be able to accelerate that movement.
So investment is something we're very passionate. I have the chair of the Capital Angel Network and my Sheboot co-founder sitting right across from me, Jennifer Francis. So we are all about fueling women founders in tech through Sheboot, which is now a national organization. How do we support more women-led and owned businesses through investment and other means in the agriculture and agri-food space?
So I'd like to say I have some good news on that. We are seeing more and more Canadian farms are actually run by women, right? And what we're also, yes, some of the banks in farming are run by women too. So so that's a really nice trend to see. And what we're also seeing, and it's part of that generation, these women that are running farms, many of them have gone to get some very sophisticated education, right? So they're bringing kind of that mindset of what do I need to do differently to really run this as a business as well as a farming operation. So some of the things that we do at FCC is we have a book, I think up to $5 billion. We're the number one lender in terms of women-led farms in Canada, but we'll often do learning workshops across the country. You know, we try to rally the community together so that they can support one another. You know, we'll bring other partners to the table to help them. And then also, I think as I'll say, as a source of insights as customers, we'll engage to try to better understand what some of those needs are. So I think, Sonya, like we need to recognize different segments of the population, what their reality is, right? I again, when I was eavesdropping, you know, when you become a mom and you've got to handle those different priorities and so forth, what can we do? And even a place like Farm Credit Canada, you know, there's things we could do, whether we're more flexible on our financing while you're on maternity leave, or, you know, we could do different things in order to be that support mechanism. So those are the things that we need to do more of, but definitely bringing that community together, making sure that capital is accessible to them, if obviously equally to anyone else, and to really encourage and support them, I think is just the beginning.
These are challenges and opportunities that we're very passionate about in this community. It's a big driver for International Women's Month. And I really resonated when you were describing the challenging environment that we're in. And it is definitely that. There is immense opportunity. And the challenging individual that you've described is driving momentum for us to do things we needed to do decades ago in this country. And so when you look forward and you think about your vision for Canada and sustainable agriculture and agri-food, help us paint that picture. What's your dream?
So before I talk about my dream, I will just mention one thing because we didn't get too much on sustainability. So I want to give you a stat. So a few people before the presentation have expressed an interest in how is Canada's, how sustainable is our agriculture vis-a-vis others. So my first sentence is, we are not perfect, but we're not bad at all. So I'll give you, so the little stat I'll give you is there's an institute in Saskatchewan called the Global Food Security Institute. And through scientific data demonstrated this. If you take a bushel of wheat that's grown in Canada, and you would have to put that bushel of wheat on a boat and go around the world, I believe it's 3.5 times for that bushel of wheat to emit the same amount of carbon as the same bushel that would be grown, I'll say, in another jurisdiction around the world. And it's not down south, it's that way. So imagine that. So Canada kicks ass vis-a-vis others in regards to how we do and how we apply sustainable practices. And again, we're not perfect, but we have an outstanding story to tell. So I gave you the bushel of wheat, but if you look at how we do crop rotation, some of the technology we apply, we are super advanced. And when you hear friction with the agriculture sector, part of that frustration on their part comes from the fact that when you take a look back in history, they have innovated for many, many years. And it was kind of like a natural inclination to innovate. So now as you come in and you say, hey, we need you to drop even further, this industry is looking to get credit for the work they've done to date. That's the friction point. And the best example of that is zero tillage. Right? So there's been so much advancement, but that came into the 80s. And that's what's helped Canada's farming to be a lot more sustainable than many other jurisdictions, but we're not able to recognize that. So vision, Sonya, Justine,
Yes.
get to the end.
But this is excellent. This is excellent to know that Canada is performing well and continuing to demonstrate leadership and building on that.
Exactly. So we perform very well, but we still need to do better. We need to be able to scale, and we need to keep that competitiveness because we are are losing it. And a big part of the solution is technology, right? So the vision of the future is that for Canada, we continue to keep that reputation we have internationally, but there's tons of opportunity for us to diversify, right? And I think it's not just an ag and food story. It's a Canadian story. The proximity to our neighbors down south made it a lot easier for us to maximize our trade there and maybe less enticing to go in other jurisdictions. But I will tell you this, because you said at one point that when we first met, when I started the job, that I said I wanted to go international. Well, I was in Singapore earlier this year. So the first year we didn't, and this year we went. And we were at a Canada-Asia conference, and we were trying to get feedback from some investors in Asia in terms of what could Canada do better. And this is what they said to us. So to me, that's our vision. They said, Canada, you are the envy of the world. You have plenty of food, it's safe, it's secure, and we love what you do. You're the envy of everybody. What are you waiting for? That's what we have to do. We have to go get our piece of the pie. We have an amazing story to tell, so we need to put that on paper, but don't worry about it, I'm working on it. And we need to take this story around the globe and imagine the power and the impact that we can have with this wonderful industry of ours. So if there's anything I would encourage all of you is every time you put something in your mouth, think about where it comes and be super proud of it. We're not perfect, but we're damn good. And we can really help the entire world get even better.
Hear, hear.
Okay.
And we're excited to help share that story. And FCC is supporting that very type of innovation right here in our region at the Smart Farm. Innovations, technology that are driving down negative environmental impact, reducing the resources, and creating bigger and better yield, healthier yield, larger yield, and making it more productive. So if you had one key takeaway before we go to the audience for questions, what key message would you like to leave with this audience today in terms of what they could do, what action they can take to support this sector in Canada at this pivotal time?
So one of the things I would do is be curious about where your food comes from and just appreciate those that are working so hard to put it on your plate. Right? It's so important. These folks are working really hard and they're super proud of what they do for this country. And I think in Canada, we have an opportunity to, I'll say, fall in love again with our ag and food industry. So it's not spring yet, but go and fall in love and be super proud because there's lots to be proud of. And it's that curiosity that'll help you discover all these really cool innovations that are happening right in your backyard.
Be proud of the founders, the producers, the innovators, the researchers. There are so many in the city and across this country that are driving that impact every single day. All right, I'm going to look to my esteemed colleagues and see. We've got some questions. Hands are already popping up. This is great. It's a very interactive audience here today.
Thank you. I probably don't need a mic for those people that know me. Justine, you're an amazing individual. I wish we could clone you. We need more of you. So I was watching CBC the other day, and there was a doctor talking about the rise in scurvy. And one of the things he was saying that this country needs to do is, because most people, what's happening is that it's easier to buy junk food than it is to buy produce. How and what's going or underway in terms of trying to flip that? Because he said if we can get fast food to be more expensive and our produce to be cheaper, we can help, not only that health concern, obviously a number.
So that is an amazing question. And I will borrow from my friend at IKEA. So I think the debate about how do we make, fast food more expensive or drop the price of fresh fruits and vegetables is not an easy task, right? Because at the end of the day, if you push too hard on that, it's the farmer that's going to lose. So and I'm assuming many of you have gone to IKEA. I don't know how many eat the meatballs at IKEA, especially when you have the kids and stuff like that. But what I was on a panel with the CFO of IKEA, and he got a similar question around sustainability and the cost. And he says, if it's within your corporate values, so the example he was giving is the plant-based meatballs at IKEA are cheaper than the protein, the other one, right? So I think the industry at large, we have to make those choices that I think over time will get better. But I'm honestly not sure that, hoping that the fast food is going to get more expensive and less accessible is going to happen. The other thing I would say is, and we are working on something with one of the associations in Canada, is to actually educate people, right? Like, where does your food come from and so forth? There's an opportunity in Canada to do some of that because people don't really know. So, and again, I think the movement we're in is actually prime for this. I'm sure you're all seeing in the grocery store, the Made in Canada, and we're seeing a shift. The key is to maintain it, right? Yeah. No, there's really cool. There's cool models out there, and we got to scale those, right? Yeah.
There might even be some coming to Ottawa, so stay tuned. Next question.
Yeah, so there was a stat earlier about agriculture being predominantly men, but there is a sector within agriculture that is 80% women activity led, and that's the equine sector. Both Lori and I represent them, her as a producer and reps a breed registry, and I work in agri-tech for the equine sector.
Excellent.
However, we fall between the cracks as being recognized as a natural agricultural sector, so our business owners, our leaders, and our up-and-coming generation don't have access to land, funding, farm registration numbers. What can we do as leaders in the industry to help keep our sector on the radar of governments, groups like Farm Credit Canada, and make sure that we're not falling behind, as we do have or have had a comparable economic impact to that of the dairy sector. But during COVID, we were very exposed because we didn't fall in sport or recreation, business, or agriculture. So how can we keep our sector involved in agriculture and as a commodity that supports health, therapy, physical activity, and is obviously a big part of the horse and buggy we've been talking about all day?
Yeah. No, great question. So there's a couple of things. I would say, and one of the things I need to say in terms of my role, so FCC, we're there to support and enable the industry, but we're not lobbyists, right? So our job is to really understand the subsectors. But I would definitely say, like, there are forums, right, where the industry gets together. And to me, that would be super important. I would say don't underestimate, the power of connecting with your local political leaders as well. And even we do that at FCC, right? Like, we'll build stats on the different sectors that are in our subsectors in our portfolio. And we'll go and make sure that members of parliament see what FCC brings to the table within their backyard. So I would suggest things like that in order to, kind of keep, so that people can keep it top of mind. And then when you're in some of these forums, like, I know there's a Future of Food conference every February, actually, right here in Ottawa. The entire industry is there. So I'd say, so you know what I mean? Go where, like-minded people and your colleagues are. And then it's through those engagements. And I will say, in the ag and food sector, especially primary ag, there's something like 400 associations. So don't start another association. We don't need 401. But in all honesty, I think that's one of the challenges, because you want to be small and mighty, but it's diluted a little bit, the impact. So I would say think partnership first to kind of merge with like-minded, and then through that you can benefit from some of the activities that they do and the engagement that they do.
Critical mass, advocacy, and impact. You need critical mass to raise that visibility. I think that we've come to the end. I see Erin has the microphone. Justine, thank you for being an incredible
pleasure.
Leader, for your investment in our region, in the smart farm, and in Canada, and for being one of our featured leaders. So well deserved.
Congrats on the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Having grown up in Guelph with a family of dairy farmers, this felt really close to home. Thank you for all the work you do, Justine. Awesome. I'm sorry I have to be bad cop and keep this thing rolling. I know we have a number of questions, and I'm sure you can reach out to the folks afterwards if you have more questions, but it's with my great delight that I get to welcome a personal hero, McKenna, founder of and CEO of Climate and Nature Solutions, and Melissa McMahon, an incredible colleague of mine, client experience coordinator with ScaleUp program, for a fireside chat on leadership, building a sustainable world and clean technology. Thank you.
Hi. Hello. Hello, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this fireside. My name is Melissa, and I am so pleased to be sitting here with Catherine, a woman who truly needs no introduction. As you know, Catherine's career has spanned law, politics, and now with her work in the private sector, has led to many landmark achievements in climate, both here at home and across the world. She is the former Minister of Environment and Climate, of Infrastructure, and currently the UN Secretary General, Chair of the UN Secretary General.
You don't
High
have to say the
Commission.
full name. It's very
Thank
long.
you.
It's very UN.
And most importantly, her work now as CEO and founder of Climate and Nature Solutions. She's also a champion for women's leadership, and which makes her the perfect person to have this conversation here today. So Catherine, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. So many friendly faces I see. I haven't done a lot in Ottawa recently, and I'm like, oh God, I love this place.
Yeah, it's a great place to be. So let's get started. You've had an expansive career shaping climate policy across both public and private sectors and on the global stage as well. I'm curious, with everything you've experienced, what's been the most powerful lesson you've learned about how to drive meaningful change in this space?
Well, I don't always win. I can say that. Look, like why, first of all, why do I work on climate? Because I think it's important, because sometimes we're like, oh, is climate just some woke agenda? Like, climate's everything, right? It's actually, looking outside, is the canal actually going to be open for skating in the future? We had a great year this year. I did go out almost every time a day was open, because I was like, we may not have it, to a national security issue when we look at our Arctic, and certainly where we are right now with what's going on in the world. It's a justice issue, because the people most impacted are the most marginalized. Often single mothers, Indigenous women, people live in low-income areas that flood. So when I got asked by the Prime Minister, to be honest, I was an environmentalist. I cared about the environment, but I wasn't one of these hardcore people. I didn't even know what a COP was, if you want to know, like the international climate conferences. I had to ask, and to say, like, okay, no dumb questions, right? To my chief of staff, he's like, yeah. I was like, what's a COP? And he's like, Conference of the Parties. And I was like, okay, that's really unhelpful. No acronyms. And so, like, look, I just am motivated by trying to make change on things that matter. And I realized, like, there could be nothing more important than working on climate. And after I left politics, I realized I've been given a lot of really useful skills and opportunities and networks. And so I was a little sick of politics, to be perfectly honest. And so I decided I'm going to use that, in particular globally, and in particular to learn some of the lessons that we've done. But I mean, when it comes to change, I think the most important thing, and women know this, is you've got to adjust, right? Like, look, in the end, it's kind of sad. I don't know if anyone followed the whole carbon pricing debate. We are not going to have a consumer carbon price, even though it works, and even though the low income and middle income people are going to get less money back. Like, it's very frustrating in a way, but you know what? It did become too divisive, and I could go through a long discussion about what happened with that, but you got to adjust. So then you got to pick yourself up, and it sucks sometimes. And sometimes in politics it was pretty hard. Luckily I had many of you supported me. Some people even would fight on social media. I was like, don't do that with those people. Don't do it. But you just have to figure out new ways to change. And I think I'll get to it a bit later. But I realized, like, one of the most powerful ways to make change is actually through women and girls on climate. They are 2.5 times more likely to push for more ambitious climate action. If you look on the corporate side, if you have women in your C-suite, on your board, you are more likely to even disclose your emissions, women are more likely to talk to their fathers, to their spouses of climate, who are less likely to believe in the science of climate change or believe that we need to act. So I realized, that's interesting, because I observed this. Like, I went to my first climate negotiations. It was the women who were pushing super hard at the negotiating table, maybe not the lead negotiator, maybe not the head of the country, but the ones that were absolutely committed to getting more ambition. So I parked that, I filed that away. And now one of the things I do kind of on the side is called Women Leading on Climate. And it's about solidarity for sure, because sometimes it can feel really lonely. My friends that work on climate that are women, we're like, we all have these visions of we're at the table alone, and we put up our hands, and we're generally not the most annoying. Like, we don't like first, we might be second, and then they'll be like, you could see around the table, and we laugh about it. So funny, because we don't care, but it's like mainly guys, and there are many guys here, or however you identify. I'm just saying my experience in these particular circumstances where it's a lot of the dudes. They are like, oh God, is she going to raise climate change again? And I'm like, yeah, damn right, I'm going to raise climate change again, because it's an economic issue. Like, what are you talking about? It's a massive risk. It's a huge opportunity. So I think in life you have to be flexible. And I was laughing because we had a little discussion about lean in. So I have a little book project, but this is going to come out at some point. But it was funny when I was thinking of lean in. Who's read Lean In? Sheryl Sandberg. Okay, I read that book and I was like, oh, so the advice is when you go to a job interview, smile more. I was like, oh my God. And everything's tied up in a bow. Like, my life has not been tied up in a bow. There's been many disasters. My children are not perfect. I got divorced. I got remarried. Whatever. I got in politics. I got out of politics. And I think that that's the one thing, if I can, I'm old now, so I don't care. I'm kind of no F's, as I say, I don't care. But it's just sometimes feeling like you're going to fail and you have to adjust. And sometimes you aren't going to want to speak up. You aren't going to lean in or whatever. Go to the IKEA ballroom with your kids on Sundays. That was my great parenting hack. I was like, I just need a break. Except sometimes the ballroom wouldn't be open because I've been in an accident. And I was like, okay, now I'm in IKEA with 3 kids. This is terrible. But life is going to go in different ways. But my only lesson, and this is what I've learned after sometimes screwing up or feeling I always had to be perfect or do what people wanted me to do, is just figure it out and focus on what you're passionate about, and don't let other people tell you what is important. Because when I left politics, I felt like I couldn't leave. I felt like I was trapped, because I felt like everyone would say, why are you leaving? You're so lucky. You're in cabinet. You can make more difference in climate change than this. And I just decided, actually, I just didn't feel that. And I didn't want to do that. And it didn't matter that my dad was like, why would you ever leave politics? Whatever. You get to choose your own path and make your own difference in a whole range of different ways, because we all have different skills and limitations. I have many limitations too, but there are ways that I think if we think differently about change and are willing to really listen, and I know it sounds kind of trite, but actually really listen. When things aren't going well and when you're not happy, and what gets you motivated, and what people you need to surround yourself with. But sometimes it's hard. And I feel particular women, when I was growing up, I felt like I always had to be good at swimming and good at school and look good and do this. And I was like, the heck is all this pressure that we're put on ourselves? It also limits you. So I feel it's just do it, lean in, but do things that matter and support other women and other people who don't. I realize I am quite privileged. And so, it's hard sometimes to give back because you're just trying to get through the day yourself. But I think it's really supporting each other in solidarity. And that has certainly helped me, certainly through politics. I would not have been able to survive some days if I didn't have my book club. I would write my book club. I never read the book. I was very terrible. I didn't even know what the book was most of the time. Not because I just was busy, and I would just be like, emergency, glass of wine. I have a bottle of wine and chips. Make it to my house, 8 p.m. Anyone who can come. And some days it would be one person, and some days it would be my whole book club. And we didn't talk about politics at all. They were just supportive. And so that's, I think what's amazing. And I do think it's amazing about the community in Ottawa of women, and also just more broadly, the entrepreneurial community that are doing awesome things. And I think just keep on keeping on.
That's great. I appreciate that.
That was like a very long-winded answer, so I'll get a little
That's
more
great.
focused.
No, that's great. We appreciate it. And the solidarity is so important. I know that's a feature here at Invest Ottawa as well. You mentioned wanting to make a difference in this space and moving from the public to the private. Do you feel like now with your work with Climate and Nature Solutions, you've been able to have an opportunity to do that more? How has that change manifested for you?
Well, it's interesting. Like, I'm actually an entrepreneur at heart. So when you're a politician, like everyone's bossing you around. I didn't really realize that. Like I was a minister and everyone's bossing me around. I was like, whoa, okay, what's going on here? And so I needed more space to be able to do what I wanted to do. I will say, like, initially it was pretty amazing. I was minister. We were going super hard. I was able to have flexibility to try to figure out, okay, we were doing negotiations internationally or negotiations in Canada. You know, I was able to have some autonomy. I think after a while, I was like, okay, this is feeling quite small and I'm not feeling I'm getting, you know, the maximum impact. So when I left, I actually didn't know what I was going to do. Because people always think like, oh, you have like your life planned out. No idea. My life has been like a lot of happenstance, like opportunities came up. But in this case, I actually literally, my biggest thing, I incorporated. I was like, incorporate and I'm just gonna don't know where I'm going. And like I got a contract from someone globally actually working on large scale conservation with Indigenous people, something I'm very passionate about. And then that one thing led to another, but it also allowed me to, when the UN Secretary General asked me, would you chair this expert group for $0? And I had to hire someone to help me, but I was like, yes, this is important. And so I was able to do both things that paid my bills and were scalable. My thing is it has to be at scale on climate, and but also do things that I also thought were important, like mentoring, or I was associated with a number of universities. Sadly, Columbia University in the US, just ended in December, and they just had a $400 million cut by the Trump administration, $400 million. And that has also impacted on their fundraising. So, I mean, you know, I felt really lucky that I could do things that I loved while still, obviously I had to pay the bills. I even left, it doesn't matter, but I left before my pension vested, which really made my dad very angry. But I was like, you can't, if you go into politics, you can't just stay to your pension vest, which would have been like a month later and then leave, obviously. So then I would have been stuck. So I was like, I'm just going to make a calculated decision that I can figure it out. And that's also a bit risk taking, right? Like I get that I'm privileged, but I also still had to pay the bills. So I was a single mom. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this because it actually is what I want to do. And I'm just going to figure it out somehow. And I think sometimes taking those risks, because it was way better. To be honest, I would have been kind of grouchy in politics. You want to be grouchy in politics. You want to be like out there helping people and excited every day. So yeah, I mean, it's great being am I in the private sector? I for sure am in the private sector. I run Climate and Nature Solutions. I work with awesome women. I've actually recreated some of the people on my political team. They've come back, but I also do other things that are in the public sector. And that's more my thing. My thing is like, just do what you think is important with people you like. And I feel extremely lucky that is what I get to do right now.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing. I know that will resonate with a lot of our audience here. We're going to come back to some of those points you mentioned, but for now, I want to turn to something that is probably on everyone's mind. So we're in a pivotal moment with everything that's happening globally with US tariffs, even here at home in Canada. I'm wondering, how do you see this current moment? And is there an opportunity to leverage these challenges and to support Canadian innovation?
Okay, so I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is a really scary moment. It's interesting because I studied international relations, and like when I look at this moment, like this is like one of those moments that is really bad. If you go look at when there was massive tariffs, that was the pre-World War II period, not to be over the top. But I don't think like in life one can't sugarcoat situations. We have to be serious. So it's not actually just about tariffs, which it is. And that makes no sense. It's obviously completely ludicrous. And I just heard, like Justine, I think, was saying that, like, we may have tariffs, we may not. It's like a reality TV show with people's lives. Okay, that's great. But beyond that, I mean, we have massive sovereignty issues. And it is true, like, we have not invested enough. I kept on saying this. Climate is a national security issue. Our Arctic, we need to be doing more with Inuit and with, like, our military and defense in our Arctic. And so I think it's a really pivotal moment. Like, I'm scared to go to the US. I just saw some climate researchers. They went to their computer and saw that they'd said things against Donald Trump. I mean, you can just go to my Twitter right now. Actually, I can't even believe I'm still on it. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky, but the problem is it's reach, right? Like, we're trying to reach people, but it's bad. So, but out of every challenging moment, there are opportunities. And this is the opportunity where Canada's got to dig deep. I'm looking at Sonya. Like, this is a time where the things when we said, oh, we're going to do procurement and focus on Canadian companies. Oh, yeah, well, maybe we will actually do that. Like, it's not like a nice to have. Now it's a must do. And the government spends a ton of money on procurement, and they should be prioritizing Canadian companies. And when people say, oh, well, that might violate trade laws, I'm like, what are you talking about? I said that anyway, often in cabinet. But I mean, now we just have to be super serious about how we are going to leverage the amazing talent and opportunities and businesses and innovation that we have here. I'm looking at Dev, who's sitting back there. I did tag you in my LinkedIn. He's great. He's always on my LinkedIn. Dev from Blue Wave AI. I know. I'm like, Dev, don't do it. Get off. Don't. They're just going to harass you and your friends and anyone that follows you. I mean, it's interesting. We have so much amazing talent, but sometimes, like, I don't know why, like, we seem to be like, maybe we're good Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts or whatever, and we just are like, well, we're not going to go do like the things that everyone else does, every other country, like just decide we're just going to like give the money to Canadians and support them. Focus on outcomes, by the way. I'm not into like doing things for announcements. I was Minister of Infrastructure. I was like, do we have to do this announcement? We haven't built anything. So I'm like not an announcement person. I'm a like gets shit done person, but we do need to be very focused. We also need to look at other markets. And we need to be supporting our entrepreneurs. I'm actually on a number of different boards. And it is true, like it is very hard to raise capital. There is the valley of death. We do have money here, but it can be very challenging for a whole variety of reasons. And I think that we have opportunities as we, invest in infrastructure in other ways, that we figure out how to support Canadian companies. I know it's kind of a question that may come up later, but we need the public and private sector to be working more closely together. We need to leverage we need public capital, leverage private capital. I think the government has some interesting models. Sometimes they're not innovative or flexible enough. And that's like starts at the very small scale. Like I remember Grocer. Is anyone here from Grocer? Yeah, like Grocer. Like all these amazing innovations. Like I love it. And so we need to figure out how do we support them, but how do we keep them in Canada? How do we keep them? But I get good news, like don't go to the US, good luck. So stay in Canada. And actually I do work in the US, and there's a lot of capital that is now looking to come north. So we need to take advantage of that, especially in the clean, green, sustainability space, which is basically almost everything right now. So I know you were talking about AI. I mean, there are challenges with AI, but also, it's also an opportunity, and we're a leader. And how do we use that to better utilize our resources, minimize our impact, be more efficient with, things. So I think it's a great opportunity, but I think people are going to have to be very, 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 very focused to that and very nimble and fast, because this is happening really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you were talking about unlocking that investment for founders. Is there another way? Is there any other recommendations you have for public and private to be working together to achieve that? Well,
this is a very large example, but when I was Minister of Infrastructure, we had the Canada Infrastructure Bank. It's actually not a bank, it's a financing vehicle. And I think it's an interesting model that what would happen is the infrastructure bank would be the first investor. So I'll just take something that maybe makes it more real. So electric buses. I was like, okay, we got to scale electric buses across Canada, but we do not have infinite taxpayer dollars. That's just a thing. Like government, when people talk about government dollars, I was like, no, it's actually taxpayer dollars. That's what it is. It's our money. So there's not enough money to do this, but there's actually a savings, obviously, with electric buses, both in terms of the maintenance, but also in terms of, saving on fuel. And so we figured out how the money could be advanced through the infrastructure bank to communities leveraging some private capital, maybe from pensions or others, and to actually do something that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And that's just one example, but there's many examples. I'm not like a finance person, so there are way smarter people than me, but there's ways to actually figure out how government can take first risk and then bring in, other capital, including there's philanthropy money, there's other money out there to do this. And I think that's at a small scale, but it also has to be a massive scale too. We got to build way more infrastructure in this country. We know we got to do that with housing, but on all, across the board, we're going to have to build more infrastructure. And so I think that's actually a huge opportunity, and you get massive returns. You get returns on your investment in terms of growth, but you also get that in terms of improving lives and in jobs. And so if we do it, and climate, so if we do it in a smart way, and we're, for the women here, you got to pay your bills, like every dollar has to be $3. So every time we think about how we do it, we should be thinking one of those dollars should be going to a Canadian employer, entrepreneur, innovator, which also creates growth and opportunity.
That's great. I appreciate that. Now, we were talking about, what it means for founders on their level. Taking it, a little bit step further, you often say that climate is an everything issue. So perhaps asking you to put your lawyer hat on here for a moment, what's the strongest economic case for sustainability? For the companies here who, want to come out of the mindset of like investing in climate means sacrificing growth. What's your answer to that? How do they integrate ESG initiatives while staying capital efficient?
Yeah, there's this weird backlash against ESG or DEI, maybe because it's acronyms, because acronyms are actually bad. It's easy to be like, oh, what are people saying there? But the reality is it's just return on your investment. And you can make a pure economic case on diversity, equity, and inclusion or sustainability. I'm happy to go head to head. Like sometimes I go to Bay Street, I was like, do you guys actually read things or McKinsey reports? I think you do, but they talk about you make better decisions with diversity. On climate, it is both a massive risk, and that's an infrastructure risk often to a particular company, flooding or fires. I was just in LA, I was at UCLA for a week as a visiting scholar, and they wanted me to come while the wildfires were still on. That was the third week in January. I was like, do you really want me? You got a lot going on. And they said, no, we need you more than ever to just be talking like a real person about why we need to do more. And also people were really down, like Donald Trump, and then wildfires is not a great situation for folks. And it's just interesting just to take that one case study. And this is what I'm trying to do through my work with the UN Secretary General, is to actually take case studies so people can understand what we're talking about. When I went to LA, so I met with a bunch of people, obviously young people, see climate as a justice issue, as a future issue, as some they're depressed often, they're wondering, should they have kids? And, you can make light of that if you're older. These are really real concerns for people who've grown up with the threat of climate change. But then I met with people whose houses were not insured. And these were rich people and people who weren't rich. No one could get insurance, and this was before the wildfire. And then I met with the city. The city is worried in the longer term about being solvent, because how can you possibly afford this? Same thing with the state, these massive fires. But then I met with the utilities. They're all getting sued, which some of it is done, but they can't actually afford it. And these utilities are publicly funded, so then people's bills go up even higher. It's all on the risk side alone if you just take risk. Now, sometimes the problem is people are like, well, what's my risk? Is my risk that bad? It is bad for everyone, by the way. We all know, because we saw wildfires and we see floods and we see droughts and we see heat domes that killed 600 people in BC that were seniors, and the town of Lytton burned down, and we saw Fort McMurray. You can go on with that. The flip side to that, so I don't want to be doom and gloom, but the people business people, you have to be doom and gloom. You're just based on dollars and cents. So the risk is the risk. If we do not figure this out, it's going to be even more expensive and our market will crash. Mark Carney, so you may have heard of him, he's now running, but he wrote a book called Values, and he talks about the Minsky moment, which is the moment where the market will actually realize that we have not built in the cost of climate change. And guess what? The market's going to tank because it's too expensive. You can't just possibly adapt. When people say this, Like often it's now a climate denial thing to say, oh, don't worry about like reducing emissions, we'll just adapt. Talking about the cost of adapting, you can't possibly cover it because it's an accelerating crisis where there's feedback loops. So, but flip side, so let's get to the positive side. The positive side is a huge opportunity. I know you were talking about AI, so Blue Wave AI, so you got Dev to come up here, not me, but I mean, like, while you optimize the grid, like, why do we, like, people are like, well, the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. I was like, yeah, great. Okay, go talk to Dev, because we can actually now, we have amazing battery storage, which is also accelerated. We can figure out ways where we actually save money and we use our natural resources in a way that is sustainable. And so I think that, and like the innovation, like, as I say, climate is an everything issue. So that means there's innovation everywhere. Like now how we build, we've been building the same way for 100 years. Like now you can totally transform how you build to procurement, because I'm kind of a nerd, so sorry. But you know, we should be looking at embedded carbon. We should be looking at, are we using low carbon cement, steel, aluminum? And we have those solutions in Canada. So we should also build in our procurement the low carbon solutions, because that will foster Canadian companies. I'm from Hamilton, so I really like low carbon steel. But there's just huge opportunities there. And like, look at grocers like innovating. Okay, how do we think about this where, you know, places where it's hard to grow? Well, you know, with the changing climate, it's really hard for farmers. Like, we know that. Like, farmers actually, sometimes they may not say climate change, but if you say changing weather, they get it. They get it, because the weather is changing, and that means you have to figure that out. So I think there's like, I can make the case in any way. And to be honest, I don't actually care why people want to work on climate. I don't care. Like, sometimes if you're religious, I'm Catholic, sort of, I'm Irish Catholic, but you know, the Pope has been amazing in talking about climate as a social justice issue. It's a social justice issue. Poorest are being the most impacted. We should care about that. Or it's an economic issue, or we're going to have climate refugees. It's a national security issue. It doesn't matter. Like, there's different ways of talking about it. So to all of you here, because I think we all need to actually care about climate change for whatever reason, talk to people in a way they care. Your neighbor doesn't have to be like a hardcore environmentalist. I don't care. But if they want to work on climate because they care about social justice and, you know, that's important to them from their, you know, religious beliefs or other beliefs, or they care about because they want to make a buck, fine, whatever it takes to get people to act. Because I think one of the big challenges, and I came, as I say, not as an environmentalist, like, way we talk sometimes in the climate world, or maybe even more broadly progressive spaces, people don't know what we're talking about, regular people. And when that happens, then people are able to say, like, I don't care, or that sounds stupid or weird or whatever. So definitely just talking like people talk about things people care about, and climate and also diversity, equity, inclusion meet all those buckets.
Thank you for that. I want to turn it back and connect it to founders here. So I imagine your career has been both high stakes and full of pushback, which is something that our entrepreneurs here know all too well. Can you tell us about a time when constraints may have driven you to get creative, think outside the box?
How many millions of times?
Yeah.
Do you want me to start with my children? Okay, actually, sometimes I fail on that one, but I mean, look, like, there's so many times where it's really hard, and like, you know, sometimes you fail. Like, I'm really sad we lost carbon pricing. I worked really hard. Like, I think had people attacking me and like death threats and all these things. But you got to pick yourself up and learn from that. And I think there are lessons for folks that want to do hard things, like in that space, about how to do hard things. You got to dig in, you got to fight for things. You may not want to fight, but you have to fight, and you have to put a clear message and do whatever. You know, there's just different examples. Like, I think even when I left politics, and as I said, I was kind of frustrated. Like, I was just like, I don't think I'm really getting the impact. And I didn't go in to be there forever, although it is an important vehicle. And if anyone here wants to run, I will help support you. I will give you, you know, whatever best advice I have, maybe some volunteers who I see here in my campaign. But I was like, how do you make change? Because that's a really big question. Like, if you're a founder, you're trying to make change. And so, you know, sometimes you just have to look outside of the way people do things and try it. And it's so trite to say that you can fail, but like I've failed many times at many things, like not always in massive ways. And people can read my CV and say, oh, wow, it was like you really planned this out since you were like 5 years old. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, but always looking, what I found when things get really hard, sometimes I get down and I have to like just step out. So I go swimming. So I don't know what you guys do, but I like really like swimming. So it could be Meech Lake or somewhere, especially open water swimming. And I just try to ground myself and I try to say like, just step back, like, what am I trying to do? Because sometimes it can get all the problems can be so big that your every little problem is like preventing you from actually figuring out what it is that is the problem and what you really want to do too. So, I mean, look, even starting from scratch, I did start like, I had an example of starting my own thing. So when I was in corporate law, I hated corporate law. I really hated it. I hated it. I want you to say how much I hated it. I really hated it. So I was like, okay. And I had worked internationally for the United Nations. I worked on a peacekeeping mission and I'd worked as a lawyer in Indonesia. And so I was like, okay, I see a supply and demand problem. There are many organizations and governments that do not have capacity. They do not have the legal expertise they need. Flip side, we have Canadian lawyers trained in a whole variety of areas who's super bored and hate their jobs. So how do we do that? And so that was really, I was like, okay. And then I came back and I started thinking, okay, well, that's me. Like, wait a minute, I'm one of these people who hates their job. And how am I going to do this? And I didn't really know. And with a friend of mine who was also a lawyer, we created Canadian Lawyers Abroad, and we were so proud of ourselves. We raised $5,000. Like, founders would understand this, and like it was a not-for-profit. I now do a for-profit. Maybe I got a bit smarter because there was a lot of constraints actually from the Canada Revenue Agency if you're doing a charity. But we do have $5,000 for a website, and I was like, we're like going to the races. And of course, that was like the easy part. Then we had to like. It was like we had to fundraise. We had to like figure out what we were doing. It was very hard to do projects internationally. And then we had all these, in good problem to have, we had all these law students who wanted to start up their own chapter. So suddenly we had a student chapter program, which as founders know, also you can't be too distracted. So suddenly we were doing all of our time over here. And I was like, but we wanted to do over here. So, but I mean, that's one example. I'm sure like, you know, most of you have tons of examples, but I think also don't be so hard on yourself. Cause I think, you know, some days you can be like, I'm such a fool. Like, why did I do this? It sucks. I'm not making enough money. I don't even know if it's going to work. I don't really have a good business plan. Like, you know, it's getting some perspective. Like, wow, it's amazing you started this. Like, it's amazing that you one day said, I'm going to leave the safety of everything else. I have this idea. I'm going to go with it. That's pretty awesome. It's not going to pay your bills, but it's pretty awesome that you did that. And then I do think networking, I've always been supported. I've found people. I mean, I wasn't like always had people there, but I would just go and ask people, and people have been extremely generous. Not everyone, but many people have been very generous to me with advice or support. Not always money. It'd be great if they invested, you know, or whatever, but that were able to lead me to other people. And I think that, I mean, you know, how do you solve problems? Big problems are really hard to solve, and it's not going to be one person, and maybe your first company isn't going to work. And I know it's easy to say a fail. Like, I love it when people are like, just fail to succeed. I was like, oh yeah, try failing. It sucks. Right? It's like, oh, that's amazing. I failed. Like, we're not all Elon Musk and then get to succeed up or whatever's going on there. But hopefully it fails. Yeah, like, I mean, it's, you know, it's life. And this is, like we talked about in my writing project, like one of the things I really think is important that we recognize we don't have to be perfect. Like, everything isn't going to go that well. And sometimes, as I say to younger people, like, you know, you always plan, and women, I think in particular, like young women, they're always like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then they're gonna like, you know, maybe meet someone, maybe have kids, I'm gonna do this. I was like, good luck. Like, oh my God, like life is not going to go like that. But it also, would you want life to go like that? Like, serendipity is a thing. Like, I ended up going to Indonesia because I did a documentary on Indonesia, on Komodo dragons. It was supposed to be Komodo dragons. We had to adjust because we couldn't spend enough time on Komodo Island one day. We needed to do a whole documentary. So it was not even about that. It was about traveling. And I was like, I can go back to this place. And so I ended up working there later on in life. Like, that's kind of cool serendipity, and you need that too. So, but you know what, failing's okay, it sucks. And then, you know, being around good people who can pick you up, but also just sometimes go swim or whatever you need to do to be in your own space and just figure out what it is that matters. Because you may decide you don't want to do this thing anymore. Like one day I decided politics, I'm just kind of done. I had to figure a way out of it, but I was like, I think this isn't really, what I really want to do, and I'm not going to be my best. And in this case, it's very consequential because you're there to help people. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Catherine. Now, we only have about 2 more minutes, I'm told, but with the last few minutes we have, if you have one call to action for everyone in the room, whether it's, in investment and their businesses and their personal lives, what would that be?
Canada first. Elbows up. I don't know. That's all I think about right now. But I mean, the good news is that's actually good for business. It's actually good. I've never seen people we should be proud. I get there are many problems. Don't get me wrong. We got a lot of work to do, but we are lucky here. Even look at this room. It's an amazing room. It's got, a lot of diversity. I don't know everyone here, but smart people who care. That is a luxury. And it's easy to say, but it is. I have lived in different places. And I think what we've got is so the situation we're in is very consequential. And my partner, he wrote out something about we need a civil defense force and everyone should be doing civil defense. That doesn't mean you're training for the military, but just prepared. And disinformation, we have to be prepared on disinformation. We're all getting fed disinformation as we go through our social media. We have not a lot of mainstream media left. But I do think that this is a moment that I think we're going to have to dig deep. And I think, I don't want to scare anyone, but I do think it's going to be a lot harder. And I think that is a time you come together. And I have been so proud of Canadians. It's just amazing to see people really step up and think about, it's sometimes easy because I saw some politics a bit, what do you get out of it? Right? Sometimes, and I'm not being mean, but I go to doors and people say, well, what's the policy for me? I'm, 65-year-old guy and I want to know my policy. I actually really believe in society and it's good. We should help everyone, but we should mostly help the people who really need a leg up, to be honest. But it's also what can we give? And so I think this is an opportunity for all of us to think what do we want our community to be? What do we want our country to be? What do we want our world to be? So of course I want you to talk about climate change and work on climate change and find amazing solutions on climate change. But most of all, I want us to just step back and think about what is really important because it is quite scary out there. But at the same time, maybe we can, value what we have more and also think about how we support others. And I will say it is supporting others in our direct community, but it's also supporting people more broadly because not everyone has it as good in our own communities, but also people internationally. I know there's this trend, so who cares about what happens? Very lucky country. We could also support people. So I don't know, but it is also I'm very competitive. I don't know if you can tell that, but it's elbows up, elbows up, Canada first, help our innovators, create jobs here, build better communities, get more housing built, get more infrastructure built, get things done, and use this moment as a moment to reflect, but also a moment to act.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That means a lot.
Everyone's it's time to go home. We're so tired.
No, that's so great. I mean, we unfortunately, we don't have any time for questions today, but Catherine will be sticking around for a few moments. If you do have anything you'd like to connect with her on, I just want to say a sincere thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for your time and your insights. So thank you all for being here.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both. A lot of really great themes. Dig deeper. It's okay to fail. Be proud of what we have here in Canada, and you can join a book club without ever having read the book. If Catherine did it, we can all, don't let them tell you otherwise. So before we close things off today, it's my pleasure to welcome Rana Sterling to the stage, an account executive with large enterprise and commercial for Rogers Communication. Please join me in welcoming Rana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rana Sterling with Rogers Cable, and I'm here and I'm honored on behalf of Rogers as a proud partner. It's been an incredible few hours filled with inspiring, thought-provoking discussions. It's a privilege to represent Rogers and support leaders creating a more sustainable world. Today, we heard from amazing leaders, entrepreneurs, and change makers who are making a real difference, not just in Ottawa, but globally. Thank you again to all our speakers, panelists, and attendees for your engagement today. And a special thanks to our partner, Invest Ottawa, for hosting an impactful event. Wishing you all a great evening and a safe drive home. Thank you.
Thank you, Rana. So thank you to everyone. Why don't we give another round of applause for all of our speakers today and all of you guys for coming out. Amazing. A special thank you to our title event sponsor, SAS, and our supporting sponsors, Calian and Rogers. Be sure to check out some of our other International Women's Month events. We have Leveraging IP for Business Success on March 25th and Creating Majority, hosted at Invest Ottawa by our Small Business Enterprise Center on March 31st. All of these events are free, so please come out. If you want to learn more about Invest Ottawa and how they can support you and your business, please visit us at our booth in the lobby. And if you want to keep this party going, you are welcome to stay here. We have an ignition pitch finale tonight, happy hour, lots of drinks and delicious food and amazing tech startups. I ask that everybody fills the survey. Please, we want to make these events better. If you have feedback for me as an MC, if it's positive, please write Erin. And if it's negative, please write Lindsay. And thank you all. Thank you all for joining us. All right, bye now.